Before the flames died out and the world turned its eyes to Westeros, there was Valyria. It was an empire unlike any other, vast, advanced, and ruled by the might of dragons. The Valyrians had a deep connection with these creatures, making them the undisputed rulers of much of the known world. But this power was not meant to last. In one sudden and catastrophic event, known simply as the Doom, Valyria was shattered. The great cities, the towering dragons, the powerful families, all of it was lost in a single fiery moment. But one family survived, and their survival would shape the future of Westeros: the Targaryens. The Targaryens weren't even considered a major force in Valyria. In fact, they were one of the lesser houses, overshadowed by the other great Dragon Lord families. So why did they survive while others fell? The answer lies in a single fateful decision. Daenerys Targaryen, known to history as Daenerys the Dreamer, had a vision. She foresaw the destruction of Valyria in a prophetic dream. It wasn't clear how or why this would happen, but her father, Aenar Targaryen, trusted her words. In what might have seemed like a peculiar move at the time, he packed up his family and their dragons and left Valyria, settling on the remote island of Dragonstone, just off the coast of Westeros. And when the Doom finally came, it was this act of foresight that saved them. The Doom itself is one of the greatest mysteries in the history of the known world. What could have caused such a massive, destructive event? Theories abound. Some believe that the Valyrians, with their mastery over magic and dragons, tampered with forces far beyond their control. Others suggest it was political, fueled by infighting between the Dragon Lord families, where sabotage, betrayal, or even a failed magical experiment led to the eruption of the 14 Flames, a ring of massive volcanoes surrounding Valyria. And then there's the theory that the free cities of Essos, desperate to break free from Valyrian control, played a part in the Empire's downfall, maybe even triggering the Doom themselves. Whatever the cause, the result was clear. Valyria fell, and with it, most of the Dragon Lords. The Targaryens, on their lonely island of Dragonstone, were suddenly the only family left with dragons. They were not powerful yet, but they were alive, and that alone made them the inheritors of a broken empire. Their new home, Dragonstone, wasn't just any island. It was a strategic fortress, the perfect stepping stone to greater things. And while the Targaryens may have once been a lesser family in Valyria, the Doom gave them an opportunity they never would have had otherwise. It set the stage for what was to come, their eventual rise to rule over Westeros. As we look back, it's clear that the Targaryen survival was no accident. Daenerys' dream, Aenar's decision to leave Valyria, and their move to Dragonstone were all pivotal moments. The fall of Valyria wasn't just the end of an empire, it was the beginning of the Targaryens' journey to power. But what was Valyria really like before it fell? Picture a realm where cities gleamed with towers of stone and glass, where dragons ruled the skies and magic was woven into daily life. Valyrian steel, the sharpest and strongest of all metals, was forged here, its secrets guarded by the Dragon Lords. The Valyrians weren't just conquerors, they were innovators, pushing the boundaries of what was possible with their dragons and magic. They controlled vast territories, and their influence stretched across continents, from Essos to the distant corners of the world. But their greatest strength, their dragons, was also their greatest risk. Perhaps they relied too much on this power, believing that nothing could topple them. And yet, here we are. The doom, that mysterious cataclysm, wiped nearly everything out, leaving only ruins and legends in its wake. For the Targaryens, however, it was a chance. Removed from the chaos and destruction, they were able to rebuild, to plan, and eventually to conquer. The move to Dragonstone, once seen as retreat or exile, became a stroke of fortune. Dragonstone itself was no ordinary island. Shaped by volcanic forces, it was both beautiful and deadly, the perfect home for a family with dragons. It was here that the Targaryens began to quietly grow in strength, waiting for the right moment to make their move on Westeros. This island, with its black stone walls and fiery heart, would serve as the foundation for everything that came after. As we move forward, we'll see how the Targaryens went from being survivors of a shattered empire to the rulers of a new one. Their journey from Dragonstone to the Iron Throne is filled with both triumphs and tragedies, shaped by the very fire that once destroyed their homeland. Centuries before House of the Dragon, Westeros was a land divided. 7 kingdoms, constantly at war, each ruled by its own family, each vying for power. But then came Aegon Targaryen, a man with a vision, not just of conquest, but of unity. He didn't want to rule one kingdom. He wanted to rule them all. And with his dragons and his 2 sisters by his side, he did just that. Aegon didn't rush into this blindly. Living on Dragonstone, he had always kept an eye on the mainland, watching as the kingdoms fought amongst themselves. He knew their weaknesses and he saw an opportunity. His goal wasn't simply about power, it was about creating a united realm, one that would be stronger together than apart. He believed that only through unity could peace be achieved. But peace wouldn't come easily. The lords of Westeros were not willing to hand over their crowns without a fight. Families like the Storm Kings, the Lannisters of the Westerlands, and the Gardeners of the Reach all stood against him. Yet Aegon had something they didn't: dragons. And not just any dragons. With his sisters Visenya and Rhaenys, he commanded 3 of the most powerful creatures in the known world: Vhagar, Meraxes, and Velaryon, the Black Dread. One of the most famous moments of Aegon's conquest came at the Field of Fire. Here, the armies of the Reach and the Westerlands joined forces to stop him. They had the numbers on their side, far outnumbering Aegon's forces. But numbers meant little against dragons. Aegon and his sisters unleashed all 3 of their beasts, raining fire down upon the battlefield. The ground itself seemed to burn, and by the time the dragons were done, the armies of the Reach and Westerlands were no more. It was a devastating display of power, one that sent a clear message to anyone who might oppose Aegon. Resistance was futile. But even after this victory, Aegon's conquest wasn't over. While many kingdoms bowed to him after the Field of Fire, there were still those who resisted. Dorne in particular held out for over a century, refusing to be brought into Aegon's new realm. Yet, Aegon wasn't just a conqueror, he was a ruler. He understood the importance of diplomacy and treated the houses that submitted to him with respect, earning their loyalty. And to symbolize his victory, he ordered the creation of the Iron Throne. The Iron Throne wasn't just any seat of power. It was forged from the swords of Aegon's enemies, melted together by dragonfire. It wasn't meant to be comfortable. It was meant to be a reminder, a constant symbol of the cost of rebellion and the might of the dragons that had won the realm. The throne itself became the very heart of power in Westeros, a brutal, jagged seat that no one could sit on without remembering the bloodshed that had built it. But Aegon's conquest wasn't just about dragons and battles. His sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys, played crucial roles in shaping the new realm. Visenya, the elder sister, was a fierce warrior, skilled with both sword and strategy. She was a sharp political mind, always calculating the next move and fiercely loyal to Aegon. Rhaenys, the younger, was more passionate, but no less important. She had a way with people, bringing a softer, more diplomatic touch to the Targaryen rule, and was beloved by the common folk. Together, these three siblings formed the foundation of a dynasty that would last for centuries. And then there were the dragons. Velaryon, the largest and most fearsome, was Aegon's personal mount. Known as the Black Dread, Velaryon was said to be so massive he could swallow a mammoth whole. His fire was so hot it could melt stone. Vhagar, flown by Visenya, and Meraxes, ridden by Rhaenys, were also powerful forces in their own right, and together the three dragons were unmatched in battle. But they weren't just weapons, they were symbols. In a world where power was everything, the dragons gave the Targaryens a divine right to rule. The Field of Fire may have been the most famous battle of Aegon's conquest, but it wasn't the only one. Every victory brought more lands under his control, and every loss taught him new lessons in rule. Yet Aegon was wise enough to know that ruling was about more than just fear. He built alliances, treated his new subjects with respect, and slowly began to unite the 7 kingdoms. But this wasn't a quick process. While the Iron Throne was born out of conquest, Aegon spent years consolidating his power. Even after his military victories, he faced resistance from some of the most powerful families in Westeros. Each kingdom had its own customs, its own traditions, and Aegon had to navigate these differences carefully. His goal was to create a unified realm, but it required diplomacy as much as it did dragonfire. The construction of the Iron Throne itself is a testament to the nature of Aegon's conquest. It wasn't just a seat. It was a monument to his victory. Aegon ordered that the swords of his enemies be gathered, heated in dragonfire, and fused together into the most intimidating throne imaginable. The message was clear. Westeros was now one realm, and he ruled it. The jagged swords that made up the throne served as a reminder that power came with a price, and anyone who challenged his rule would meet the same fate as those who had fallen before. Aegon's conquest was the beginning of a new era in Westeros. It marked the start of a dynasty that would rule for nearly 300 years. But more than that, it was the birth of a unified realm, one that would forever be shaped by the fire and blood of the Targaryens. The Dance of the Dragons was not just any civil war. It was a brutal, bloody conflict that tore apart the very core of the Targaryen family and nearly brought an end to their reign. It's a story of ambition, betrayal, and the heavy price of power. What began as a dispute over succession quickly escalated into one of the most devastating wars in Westerosi history. And at the heart of it all were the dragons, the creatures that had once symbolized Targaryen dominance, now becoming instruments of destruction. The seeds of the dance were planted long before swords were drawn or dragons took flight. The death of King Viserys I left a power vacuum that needed to be filled. By law, his daughter, Princess Rhaenyra, was named as his rightful heir. Viserys had made this clear throughout his reign, publicly declaring her as the future ruler. But not everyone was willing to follow his wishes. Rhaenyra's stepmother, Alicent Hightower, had her own ambitions. Alicent's son, Aegon II, represented a more traditional claim to the throne. Backed by those who believed in male primogeniture, the idea that the eldest male should inherit regardless of prior promises. This division between the two factions, the Blacks who supported Rhaenyra and the Greens who rallied behind Alicent and Aegon II, fractured the realm. It wasn't just a family feud, it was a political conflict that divided noble houses, with many forced to pick a side. Some saw Rhaenyra as the rightful heir, standing by her father's decree, while others believed Aegon's claim was stronger simply because he was male. What followed was not just a war for the throne, but a battle for the very soul of Westeros. Dragons played a central role in this conflict, and it was their fire that truly turned the tide in many battles. Rhaenyra's side commanded dragons like Syrax, the swift and golden beast she had bonded with, and Caraxes, the fierce red dragon ridden by her husband, Prince Daemon. Aegon's side boasted Sunfire, a magnificent dragon with scales that shimmered like gold, and the older, more battle-hardened Vhagar. The war was not just fought on the ground. It was waged in the skies, with dragon-on-dragon combat tearing across the realm. One of the most dramatic moments of the war was the battle at Rook's Rest. This battle saw Rhaenyra's dragon Meleys, ridden by Princess Rhaenys, go up against Aegon II's Sunfire and his mother's dragon, Vhagar. It was a clash of fire and wings, with both sides suffering devastating losses. Meleys fought bravely but was ultimately overpowered, and her death marked a turning point in the war. This was not a conflict where dragons guaranteed victory. Each battle left both sides weaker, with fewer dragons to call upon, and the Targaryen family paid dearly for their use of these magnificent creatures in warfare. The Civil War saw countless betrayals and shifting alliances. Even houses that had pledged loyalty were quick to switch sides as the tide of war changed. Battles like the First and Second Battle of Tumbleton, as well as the Battle of the Gullet, became infamous for their brutality. Each side was desperate for control, but the cost was unimaginable destruction. Cities were burned, lands were laid to waste, and innocent people caught in the crossfire suffered terribly. The very strength of the Targaryen dynasty, its dragons, had become a source of chaos and ruin. The toll on the dragons themselves was immense. Once the great symbols of Targaryen power, these creatures were slaughtered in battle after battle, their numbers dwindling as the war dragged on. By the end of the dance, only a few dragons remained alive, and their near extinction weakened the Targaryens' hold on Westeros. The war had not only fractured the family, but it had also stripped them of the very creatures that had once made them invincible. The aftermath of the Dance of the Dragons left the realm in tatters. Though Aegon II emerged as the victor, his reign was short-lived and filled with strife. His victory was hollow, as the war had drained the resources of the kingdom and shattered the stability of the realm. Rhaenyra's supporters, though defeated, still held influence, and the bitter scars left by the conflict would linger for generations. In the end, the Iron Throne passed to Rhaenyra's son, Aegon III. But by the time he took the throne, the dragons were nearly gone, and the power they symbolized was fading fast. The Targaryens would rule for generations to come, but they would never again hold the same absolute power as they did before the war. The Dance of the Dragons had shattered their dynasty and left their once great house vulnerable, weakened by its own internal conflict. The dance wasn't just a civil war. It was a reminder that even the mightiest can fall. It showcased the dangers of unchecked ambition, the destructive nature of family feuds, and the tragic consequences of war. The dragons, once the pride of the Targaryen family, were almost lost forever, and with them, the hope of a unified and stable realm. The Targaryens had paid a heavy price for their desire to rule, and Westeros would never be the same again. The Kingsguard is one of the most revered institutions in Westeros, an elite group of knights sworn to protect the king and his family. But it wasn't just the product of political necessity. It was the brainchild of one of the fiercest women in Targaryen history, Visenya Targaryen. As both sister and wife to Aegon the Conqueror, Visenya was known for her strength in battle and sharp political mind, playing a key role in shaping the foundations of Targaryen rule. It was her vision that led to the creation of the Kingsguard, an order that would go on to protect the Iron Throne for generations. The idea for the Kingsguard was born out of a moment of vulnerability. Despite their dragons and vast armies, the Targaryens were not invincible. After an assassination attempt on Aegon I, Visenya realized that no amount of fire and blood could protect the king from every threat. Dragons could raise cities and win battles, but they couldn't be everywhere at once, especially when it came to personal security. Visenya saw the need for a highly skilled, loyal group of knights whose sole purpose was to protect the king from human threats, something no dragon could do. Visenya modeled the Kingsguard after other elite forces, taking inspiration from the Warriors' Sons, a military order of the Faith of the Seven, and the Night's Watch. However, unlike these groups, the Kingsguard was sworn to serve only the king and his family. They took vows of celibacy, renouncing all personal ambitions, land, and titles. This was essential to ensure their loyalty was undivided. These knights would have no outside obligations, no family or land to distract them. Their only duty was to the crown. Each knight of the Kingsguard wore a distinctive white cloak, symbolizing their purity, honor, and devotion. This cloak was more than just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of their commitment to the crown, representing their vow to remain untainted by personal desires or political ambitions. To serve in the Kingsguard was to be completely loyal to the king, and the white cloak served as a constant reminder of that sacred duty. Visenya's role in creating the Kingsguard speaks volumes about her political acumen. While Aegon was the face of the conquest, Visenya often worked behind the scenes, ensuring that the Targaryens' hold on power remained secure. She understood that power wasn't just about dragons and armies. It was also about maintaining control, about protecting the king from the threats that couldn't be burned away with dragon fire. The Kingsguard became a symbol of this control, an ever-present reminder of the king's authority and the lengths the Targaryens were willing to go to preserve their dynasty. Over time, the Kingsguard became an iconic part of Targaryen rule. Throughout history, they have been involved in some of the most pivotal moments in Westeros. Ser Criston Cole, for example, played a crucial role during the Dance of the Dragons, the civil war that nearly tore the Targaryen family apart. As Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Cole's loyalty to Aegon II and his pivotal decisions shaped the course of the conflict. His betrayal of Princess Rhaenyra, once his close ally, earned him the nickname Kingmaker, as he became one of the central figures supporting Aegon's claim to the throne. But the Kingsguard's role wasn't always clear-cut. The order was sworn to protect the king, but that didn't mean the knights themselves were free from personal conflicts. Loyalties could be tested, especially when politics got involved. Take Sir Jaime Lannister, for example, who infamously killed King Aerys II, earning him the title of Kingslayer. Though sworn to protect the king, Jaime chose to kill him to prevent further bloodshed. This moment highlighted the complexity of the Kingsguard's role. How could a knight uphold their vows when the king they swore to protect was leading the realm to ruin? The legacy of the Kingsguard isn't just about their individual members, it's about the role they've played in shaping Westeros. Their presence has often been seen as a reflection of the king's power. A strong and honorable Kingsguard suggested a strong and stable reign, while a corrupt or divided Kingsguard hinted at trouble within the throne. Throughout history, the Kingsguard has been both a force of stability and a source of intrigue, often caught in the middle of succession, crises, rebellions, and wars. One of the more tragic aspects of the Kingsguard is that despite their vows, they were not immune to the political games of the realm. While they were supposed to be neutral figures, solely focused on protecting the king, their personal loyalties and ambitions often clashed with their duties. During the Dance of the Dragons, the Kingsguard found themselves divided. Some knights supported Rhaenyra, while others backed Aegon II, leading to internal strife within the order. This division mirrored the larger conflict in Westeros, as even the most honorable knights found it difficult to stay impartial in a war that tore the realm apart. The Kingsguard, created out of Visenya's foresight and political wisdom, became one of the most enduring symbols of Targaryen rule. They were protectors, loyal servants, and sometimes unwilling pawns in the larger Game of Thrones. As much as they swore to serve the crown, their personal choices often reflected the larger complexities of Westeros itself, a land where loyalty, power, and ambition were constantly at odds. In House of the Dragon, we see the impact of Visenya's legacy as the Kingsguard plays a crucial role in the unfolding events. Whether standing guard over the Iron Throne or caught in the political machinations of those who seek it, the Kingsguard continues to be a powerful symbol of both protection and the darker side of power. Visenya may have created them to safeguard the king, but over time, they became much more, a testament to the delicate balance of loyalty and ambition in a world where even the most honorable can be pulled into the web of power. Long before the Targaryens brought their dragons to Westeros, there was Valyria, the heart of the world's most advanced and powerful civilization. Known as the Freehold, Valyria was unlike anything Westeros had ever seen. A sprawling empire built on magic, dragons, and conquest. The Dragon Lords of Valyria wielded unmatched power, shaping the fate of nations with the creatures they had mastered. But the origins of these Dragon Lords and the rise of Valyria itself are shrouded in mystery, leaving behind only legends of a forgotten empire. The Valyrians weren't the first to encounter dragons, but they were the ones who unlocked their true potential. It's believed that the first dragons came from the Shadowlands beyond Ashai, a distant and mysterious region in Essos known for its dark magic. Somehow the Valyrians found these dragons, or perhaps their eggs, on the slopes of the 14 Flames, a chain of volcanoes surrounding Valyria. These volcanoes were the heart of the Valyrian freehold, and it was here that the Valyrians first learned to tame and ride dragons, forever changing the balance of power in the world. The origins of the Valyrians themselves are cloaked in myth. One popular theory suggests that they were originally shepherds who stumbled upon dragon eggs and through a combination of bravery and magic began experimenting with these creatures. Another theory hints at something far older, that the Valyrians may have inherited ancient knowledge from a lost civilization, one that had mastered both dragons and magic long before Valyria rose to prominence. Some even speculate that the Valyrians were descendants of the great Empire of the Dawn, a powerful and ancient civilization from the distant East, whose knowledge of magic and dragons could have been passed down through the ages. What set the Valyrians apart from other cultures wasn't just their control of dragons, but their mastery of magic, particularly blood magic. This dark and powerful sorcery allowed the Valyrians to strengthen their bond with dragons, making them the unrivaled rulers of their time. Blood sacrifices were a key component of their magic, and it's believed that the lives of slaves were often used to fuel the Dragon Lord's sorcery. The combination of blood magic and dragon power made Valyria a force that no other nation could challenge for thousands of years. The Valyrian freehold wasn't ruled by a single monarch. Instead, it was a council of the most powerful Dragon Lord families, each wielding immense influence over their territories. This freehold system was more democratic than the monarchies of Westeros, but it was also built on extreme inequality. The Dragon Lord families held all the power, while a massive class of slaves supported the entire empire. The dragons they controlled were not just weapons of war, they were symbols of divine right and power, ensuring that the Valyrian elite remained unchallenged. One of the most fascinating aspects of Valyrian culture was their practice of incestuous marriage. The Valyrians believed that keeping their bloodlines pure was essential to maintaining their power over dragons. By marrying within their own family, they hoped to preserve the magical bond between themselves and their dragons. The practice was later mirrored by the Targaryens, who followed the same tradition when they settled in Westeros. It raises interesting questions about how their magical abilities and dragon riding skills may have been influenced by their bloodlines. Did the purity of their blood grant them greater control over the dragons, or was it simply a belief they held on to, passed down through generations? The relationship between the Valyrians and their dragons was almost symbiotic. Some legends say that the Valyrians communicated with their dragons through ancient magic, using spells and incantations to command the creatures. Others suggest that special relics like dragon horns were used to summon and control the beasts. These horns, made from the bones of ancient dragons, were said to have the power to command any dragon that heard their call. Whether through magic or sheer force of will, the bond between dragon and rider was the key to the Valyrians' dominance. Valyrian influence stretched far beyond their borders. They controlled trade routes, expanded their empire across Essos, and their magic and dragon power were unmatched. Valyrian steel, a metal forged with dragon fire and spells, became one of the most coveted materials in the world. Blades made from Valyrian steel were not only stronger and sharper than any other, but they also held a unique magical quality, making them particularly effective against supernatural threats like the others, also known as White Walkers. Even after Valyria's fall, weapons made from this rare material remained prized possessions, and they became symbols of power and prestige in Westeros. But like all great empires, Valyria eventually met its end. The Doom, a cataclysmic event that erupted from the 14 flames, wiped out the freehold in a single day. The cities, the dragon lords, the dragons themselves, all of it was lost in fire and ash. What caused the Doom remains one of the greatest mysteries in history. Some believe it was a natural disaster, a volcanic eruption that no amount of magic could stop. Others suggest that the Valyrians' overuse of magic, particularly blood magic, triggered the disaster. Perhaps they delved too deeply into forces they didn't fully understand, causing their own destruction. Another theory posits that the free cities of Essos, long under Valyrian control, may have sabotaged the empire, desperate to break free from its grasp. The Targaryens, one of the lesser Dragonlord families, were the only ones to survive the Doom. Thanks to Daenerys the Dreamer's prophetic vision, her father, Aenar Targaryen, moved his family to Dragonstone years before the cataclysm. This act of foresight saved them from the destruction that befell the rest of Valyria, and it positioned them as the last surviving dragon lords in the world. House Targaryen's survival is one of the key reasons why Valyria's legacy lived on in Westeros. The legacy of old Valyria looms large in House of the Dragon. The Targaryens see themselves as heirs to the lost empire, and their connection to dragons is a direct link to Valyria's greatness. Even though Valyria is long gone, its influence is still felt in the world, through the myths of dragons, the magic that remains, and the political legacy that the Targaryens carry with them. Their rule over Westeros is not just about power, it's about preserving the legacy of a lost empire, an empire that once stood as the most advanced civilization in the known world. As we continue to explore the history of the Targaryens, we'll see how their Valyrian heritage shaped not only their rise to power, but also the downfall that awaited them. The story of Valyria is a reminder that even the greatest empires can crumble, and that power, no matter how formidable, always comes with a cost. Perched on a volcanic island off the coast of Blackwater Bay, Dragonstone stands as a fortress steeped in both history and fire. Its black stone towers and dragon-shaped spires evoke the distant memories of Valyria, the empire that birthed a lineage of dragon lords. Dragonstone was the seat of power for the Targaryen family long before their conquest of Westeros, serving as both a refuge and a symbol of their might. In House of the Dragon, it plays an even more significant role, standing at the center of both political and personal conflicts. Originally built by Valyrians before the Doom, Dragonstone is one of the oldest castles in the Seven Kingdoms. Its architecture, unlike anything else in Westeros, mirrors the volcanic rock of its homeland and the creatures that ruled the skies. Carved into the stone are images of dragons, their shapes winding around the castle as a constant reminder of the power this family once held. The black stone used in its construction, believed to have been shaped by magic, adds an eerie aura to the island. Its volcanic origins make it a place where heat and fire are ever present, perfect for the creatures the Targaryens brought with them. The strategic importance of Dragonstone is undeniable. Located at the mouth of Blackwater Bay, it serves as a gateway to the capital and the Seven Kingdoms beyond. This position made it not only a fortress but also a launching point for trade, defense, and, most famously, conquest. For nearly a century, the family quietly built their strength here, away from the turmoil of Valyria. It was from Dragonstone that Aegon launched his invasion of Westeros, setting the stage for a dynasty that would rule for generations. But Dragonstone is more than just a castle. Its volcanic landscape, with caves and hot springs scattered across the island, makes it an ideal home for dragons. The creatures that the family brought with them found refuge in the island's natural environment, where they could nest and thrive. This connection between the dragons and the land itself reinforced the Targaryens' power, as the dragons became an extension of their legacy, fire and blood woven into the very rock of the island. In House of the Dragon, Dragonstone plays a pivotal role in the brewing civil war within the family. After being named the heir to the throne, Princess Rhaenyra is given Dragonstone as her seat, a move that symbolizes her future as ruler. This title, Princess of Dragonstone, becomes a mark of both status and responsibility. As tensions rise between her faction and that of her half-brother Aegon II, the island transforms into more than just a home. It becomes a battleground in the fight for the Iron Throne. The significance of Dragonstone is not just tied to its physical presence. It is a symbol of Targaryen legacy, their connection to the lost empire of Valyria, and their claim to the Iron Throne. Throughout the family's history, Dragonstone has been a place of both refuge and conflict, where decisions are made that affect the fate of the entire realm. In House of the Dragon, this dynamic plays out as the island becomes a base for Rhaenyra's supporters, a gathering point for those loyal to her claim. The fortress's connection to dragons cannot be overlooked. Rhaenyra's dragon, Syrax, often resides on the island, using its volcanic caves as a nesting ground. The geography of Dragonstone, with its hot springs and rocky terrain, creates an ideal environment for these creatures. This natural landscape, combined with the family's long history of dragon riding, makes Dragonstone not only a symbol of their power, but a practical home for their most dangerous assets. The relationship between the island and the dragons is almost symbiotic, with each enhancing the strength of the other. Dragonstone's role in House of the Dragon reflects the deeper conflicts within the family. It serves as a stronghold for Rhaenyra, but it also becomes a place of tension as her enemies eye it as both a strategic and symbolic prize. The island represents everything the Targaryen family stands for: their connection to dragons, their claim to the throne, and their long history as rulers. But it also becomes a focal point for the divisions that threaten to tear them apart. Beyond its place in this story, Dragonstone has played an important role throughout the larger Game of Thrones universe. It was once the home of Stannis Baratheon, who used the fortress as a base in his own attempt to claim the Iron Throne. Though its connection to the Targaryen family remained dormant during his reign, the memory of the dragons that once ruled from its black stone halls never faded. The castle, like the family that built it, remains a symbol of power, even as the world around it changes. Dragonstone is more than just a seat of power. It is a reminder of what was lost in the doom of Valyria and what remains in the blood of the family that escaped its destruction. It's a place where history and magic collide, where dragons nest and rulers are made. In House of the Dragon, this ancient fortress once again becomes a center of power, a place where the fate of the realm is decided and the legacy of a once great empire continues to unfold. The Velaryons of Driftmark are a family rooted in the sea, a force of nature in their own right, and perhaps the most important allies the Targaryens ever had. While the Targaryens wielded their dragons, the Velaryons commanded the waves. Their mastery of the seas gave them immense power, and their strategic marriage alliances with the Targaryens solidified their role as key players in the world of House of the Dragon. Without the Velaryons' naval might, the Targaryens may never have risen to the heights they did, or maintained their grip on the Seven Kingdoms for as long. Driftmark, the Velaryon stronghold, sits just west of Dragonstone, and that proximity was no coincidence. From the moment the family arrived in Westeros, they became natural allies to the Targaryens. Though the Velaryons were never dragon lords, their Valyrian blood and seafaring prowess made them indispensable. Their influence stretched far beyond the shores of Westeros. Through trade, exploration, and sheer naval dominance, they secured their wealth and power. In fact, during House of the Dragon, Corlys Velaryon, also known as the Sea Snake, is one of the most powerful men in the realm, his legendary voyages making him richer than anyone could imagine. Corlys's adventures took him to places that most only dream about. He sailed further than any other, venturing to distant lands like Yiti, Leng, and the Summer Islands, amassing wealth that rivaled even the crown's coffers. His fleet became the largest and most formidable in Westeros, giving him unparalleled control over Blackwater Bay and the seas beyond. This control wasn't just about wealth, it was about power. The Velaryon fleet played a pivotal role in Targaryen conquests, especially during the civil war that would later rip the family apart, the Dance of the Dragons. The Targaryens may have ruled the skies with their dragons, but it was the Velaryons who ruled the seas. The close ties between the Velaryons and Targaryens were solidified through marriage. Corlys himself married into the Targaryen family, wedding Rhaenys, a woman who would forever be known as the Queen Who Never Was. Passed over in favor of her cousin Viserys, Rhaenys had a strong claim to the throne that many believed was unjustly denied. Her marriage to Corlys created a powerful alliance, blending the strength of the sea with the might of dragons. Together, they became a formidable political force, though Rhaenys would never sit the Iron Throne. Their children played key roles in the unfolding events of House of the Dragon. Laenor, their son, married Princess Rhaenyra, a union that further tightened the bond between these two great houses. Laenor was instrumental in the political alliances that shaped the war, but his personal struggles added layers of complexity to his role. His marriage to Rhaenyra wasn't just a political move, it also had ramifications for the line of succession. The Velaryon connection to the Targaryens wasn't just through blood, but through their dragons. Laenor's sister, Lena, took to the skies on the back of Vhagar, one of the most powerful dragons in Westeros. Laena, who later married Prince Daemon, became a key player in the war, her bond with Vhagar making her one of the most formidable dragon riders in the realm. The Velaryon children were more than just pawns in the political game. They were essential pieces in the ever-shifting power dynamics of the realm. Their dragons and their connections to the sea gave the Velaryons a unique strength that few other houses could match. As the Dance of the Dragons unfolded, the Velaryons' naval supremacy proved invaluable. Driftmark's location made it a critical stronghold during the Civil War, and the Velaryon fleet was key to controlling the waters around the capital. Without their ships, the war might have played out very differently. Their fleet kept supply lines open, blockaded enemies, and ensured that Rhaenyra's supporters could maintain their hold on crucial ports. The Velaryons' role in the Civil War wasn't just about brute force, it was about strategy, timing, and their unparalleled mastery of the seas. The Civil War took a heavy toll on everyone involved, and the Velaryons were no exception. Their loyalty to Rhaenyra's cause put them in the crosshairs of those who supported Aegon II, and the war's brutal aftermath left scars on the family. But even as the Targaryen dynasty began to crumble, the Velaryons remained steadfast allies. They had built their strength on the waves, and no matter how much the political landscape shifted, their dominance of the seas remained. Driftmark itself, the seat of their power, became a symbol of both their rise and their resilience. As the largest island in Blackwater Bay, it was strategically positioned to influence the course of the war, and its proximity to Dragonstone made it a natural extension of Targaryen power. In the larger Game of Thrones universe, Driftmark may not be as well known as Dragonstone or King's Landing, but in the events of House of the Dragon, it is the nerve center of the Velaryons' influence. The legacy of the Velaryons is one of adaptability and strength. While they didn't wield dragons, they didn't need to. Their mastery of the seas, their wealth, and their strategic marriages gave them an unshakable place in Westerosi politics. The Velaryons were more than just allies to the Targaryens. They were a family that understood power in all its forms, whether through naval supremacy or the intricate web of political alliances. The Dance of the Dragons may have ended in devastation, but the Velaryon story is a testament to the enduring power of the sea. While dragons dominated the skies, the Velaryons ruled the waters, ensuring that their legacy, much like the tides, would rise and fall, but never truly disappear. Rhaenyra Targaryen, known in her youth as the Realm's Delight, is at the center of the storm that sweeps through House of the Dragon. Her claim to the Iron Throne, though once embraced with optimism, becomes the spark that ignites a civil war. As the first officially recognized female heir to the throne, Rhaenyra's ascent was meant to represent a new era for the Seven Kingdoms. Instead, it plunged the realm into chaos as family loyalties, political ambitions, and age-old traditions collided. Rhaenyra's rise began with her father, King Viserys I, who loved her dearly and named her his heir in defiance of Westeros's patriarchal norms. In a world where power traditionally flowed through male lines, this was no small declaration. Rhaenyra wasn't just a princess. She was a symbol of the future, someone who could change the course of Westerosi history. From a young age, she was groomed to rule, trained in the ways of the court, and well aware of the weight of the crown that was promised to her. Her connection to the dragons, including her bond with Syrax, further cemented her image as a worthy ruler. However, her rightful claim was not without challenges. Her father's marriage to Alicent Hightower and the subsequent birth of her half-brother, Aegon II, shifted the dynamics of power in ways Rhaenyra couldn't have foreseen. What was once a clear path to the throne became clouded by doubts, whispers, and political maneuvering. Many within the realm began to question whether a woman could truly sit on the Iron Throne. And those doubts were eagerly fueled by Alicent's growing faction, who saw Aegon as the true heir. This division wasn't just about family politics, it was about the very future of the realm. Rhaenyra had strong supporters, including her uncle, Prince Daemon, and House Velaryon, who saw her as the rightful ruler and a continuation of the Targaryen legacy. But the Greens, led by Alicent and her powerful father, Otto Hightower, had other plans. For them, Aegon was the only legitimate ruler, and they were prepared to go to war to ensure his place on the throne. Rhaenyra's political ambitions were deeply intertwined with her relationships. Her marriage to Laenor Velaryon, a union meant to secure the powerful Velaryon fleet and solidify her claim, became a focal point of both loyalty and scandal. Rumors swirled about the true parentage of her children, which her enemies used to weaken her position. But despite these challenges, Rhaenyra remained a determined and capable leader, never shying away from the responsibilities or the ambitions of the crown. Her later marriage to Prince Daemon, a move that shocked many, only further complicated the already tense situation. Daemon was both an asset and a liability. His ruthlessness and military prowess made him a powerful ally, but his unpredictable nature made him a dangerous partner. Together, Rhaenyra and Daemon formed a formidable force, one that was prepared to challenge the entire realm if necessary. As the Dance of the Dragons unfolded, Rhaenyra's role was pivotal. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for the future of her children, for the legacy of her family, and for the throne that had been promised to her since she was a child. Her relationship with Alicent and Aegon, once complicated by family ties, transformed into bitter rivalry. What began as personal tensions between two women, Alicent, the mother of the supposed heir, and Rhaenyra, the rightful heir, soon spiraled into a full-scale civil war that tore Westeros apart. The dance wasn't just a battle of swords and dragons. It was a battle of ideals, of who had the right to rule. Rhaenyra's fight for the throne became symbolic of the struggle between tradition and change, between old Westerosi norms and a new order that could have reshaped the realm. But as the war dragged on, the cost of that struggle became increasingly clear. The destruction, the loss of life, both human and dragon, left scars that would last for generations. Throughout this brutal conflict, Rhaenyra's resilience was unmatched. She was not just a queen fighting for her birthright, but a mother protecting her children, and a ruler defending her people. However, the very traits that made her a compelling leader also made her vulnerable. The weight of her decisions, the betrayals she endured, and the personal losses she suffered during the war all contributed to the eventual downfall of her claim. Rhaenyra's story is one of both triumph and tragedy. She was a woman ahead of her time, fighting to break the cycle of male dominance in Westeros. But she was also a product of her world, bound by its rules, shaped by its violence, and, ultimately, undone by the very people she sought to lead. Her legacy, much like that of the Targaryen family itself, is complex. She was both a beloved figure and a divisive one, a rightful ruler and a symbol of the chaos that followed her claim. In the end, the fight for the throne wasn't just about power. It was about what kind of world Rhaenyra wanted to create. Though her reign was brief and marked by conflict, her influence on the realm is undeniable. The civil war she fought in not only reshaped the political landscape of Westeros, but also set the stage for the eventual decline of the dragons and the Targaryen dynasty itself. Rhaenyra's story is a testament to the dangers of power and the cost of ambition. She was the realm's delight, the first female heir to the Iron Throne, and her fight for that throne was one of the most important battles in Westeros' long and bloody history. But in a world as unforgiving as Westeros, even the most rightful claim can come with unimaginable consequences. In the battle for the Iron Throne, it's not just about who has the claim, it's about who has the backing. When the Targaryen court split into two opposing factions, the Green Council, supporting Aegon II, and the Black Council, loyal to Rhaenyra, the stage was set for a brutal civil war that would change Westeros forever. This divide, rooted in personal rivalries, political ambition, and tradition, became one of the most pivotal moments in the realm's history. The division had its origins in the strained relationship between Rhaenyra and Queen Alicent Hightower. What began as a personal rivalry between the king's firstborn daughter and his second wife, Alicent, soon became a political crisis that divided the entire realm. Rhaenyra had been named heir by her father, King Viserys I, but the birth of Alicent's son, Aegon, complicated everything. As Alicent's influence grew, so did the Green Council, which rallied around Aegon's claim, arguing that as the king's eldest male son, he was the rightful heir. Tradition was on their side, as Westeros had never seen a ruling queen, and many feared the precedent Rhaenyra's rule could set. The Black Council, on the other hand, was adamant that Rhaenyra's claim was legitimate. Backed by powerful houses like the Velaryons and led by Rhaenyra and her uncle Daemon, they believed the king's decree should be honored and that Rhaenyra's birthright should not be cast aside for the sake of tradition. For them, this wasn't just about maintaining stability, it was about fighting for the future they believed in. With Rhaenyra at the helm, the Black Council represented a new order, one that would challenge the male-dominated status quo. In the Green Council, Queen Alicent and her father, Otto Hightower, were the central figures. Otto, as Hand of the King, had positioned himself at the heart of the political machine, ensuring key figures like Sir Criston Cole were aligned with Aegon's cause. Criston Cole's shift in loyalty, from Rhaenyra's close ally to her bitter enemy, strengthened the Green Council's military power as he brought the loyalty of the Kingsguard with him. With these moves, the Green Council had established a solid foundation from which they could contest the throne. The Black Council, led by Rhaenyra and Daemon, was equally formidable. Daemon, with his ruthless demeanor and military expertise, became a crucial asset. Together with House Velaryon's vast naval fleet, the Black Council boasted not only dragons, but control over key trade routes and supply lines. In the early stages of the conflict, it seemed as though Rhaenyra's side had the upper hand. Dragons gave them a significant advantage in warfare, and the support of powerful allies added further legitimacy to her claim. As the Dance of the Dragons began, both councils sought to secure the loyalty of Westeros's most influential houses. The Green Council, representing the more conservative, traditional faction, appealed to the established lords who favored maintaining the male line of succession. For them, Aegon's claim wasn't just the safer option, it was the right one. The Black Council, however, represented a break from tradition. They saw in Rhaenyra's rule the possibility of change and the chance to reshape the future of the realm. But loyalty in Westeros is a fickle thing. Both councils experienced betrayals, shifting alliances, and the uncertainty of war. Houses that initially swore fealty to one side would sometimes find themselves switching allegiances, often driven by the tides of battle or the promise of power. The political machinations of both councils were a constant dance of strategy and survival. While the dragons dominated the skies, it was the behind-the-scenes maneuvering that shaped much of the war's outcome. In the Green Council, Otto Hightower's cunning was a driving force. His ability to navigate the complex web of alliances, his strategic marriages, and his manipulation of key figures kept Aegon's claim alive, even as the Black Council gained ground. On the other side, Daemon's aggressive tactics and Rhaenyra's determination kept their council united. Though tensions often simmered beneath the surface, the Black Council's use of dragons as both a symbol and a weapon sent shockwaves throughout the realm. But their reliance on dragonfire came with its own risks. The war between the two councils devastated Westeros. Cities burned, families were torn apart, and the Targaryen dynasty itself was forever scarred. But the political games didn't end with the war. After the conflict, both the Green Council and the Black Council had to contend with the aftermath of their actions. The political landscape of Westeros was left fractured, with old alliances broken and new power structures emerging. In the end, the question of support wasn't just about who had the most soldiers or dragons. It was about who could navigate the labyrinth of Westerosi politics, who could secure the loyalty of key players, and who could outmaneuver their enemies at every turn. The dance of the dragons may have been fought with fire and blood, but it was won or lost by the delicate balance of power behind the scenes. Both councils left a lasting impact on the realm. The scars of their rivalry shaped Westeros for generations to come, as the political fallout from the Civil War forever changed the way power was viewed and wielded in the Seven Kingdoms. In House of the Dragon, there is no character more complex or unpredictable than the man known as the Rogue Prince. A warrior with unparalleled skill and a sharp political mind, Daemon Targaryen was both a fierce ally and a dangerous rival, depending on where his ambitions lead him. From the beginning, he was always one to defy the rules, someone who lived by his own code, regardless of what others thought. Early on, his rebellious nature made waves. He was not content to live in the shadow of his older brother, King Viserys. Instead, he sought power and glory for himself, often at odds with his brother's more diplomatic approach. His boldness, both in battle and in politics, earned him as many enemies as it did admirers. However, his undeniable military prowess couldn't be ignored. His campaigns, particularly in the Stepstones, showcased his strategic brilliance and thirst for conquest. These victories not only cemented his reputation as a fearsome warrior, but also laid the groundwork for his later involvement in the Civil War. A major part of his character is his loyalty to family, though it is often intertwined with his personal ambitions. While he fought for his house, his actions were also driven by his desire for personal power and recognition. This duality is what makes him such a captivating figure. His loyalty is real, but it is never without an underlying motive. His relationships were as fiery as his personality. Over the course of his life, he formed alliances through marriage, each one significant in its own right. His first marriage to Rhea Royce was politically strategic, though it never brought him the power or status he craved. It wasn't until later, with his marriage to Laenor Velaryon, that he began to secure more influence. This union tied him to one of the most powerful families in Westeros, giving him the support he needed for his ambitions. However, it was his final marriage that truly shifted the political landscape. His union with Rhaenyra, his niece, wasn't just a personal connection. It was a move that bound their fates together, aligning their goals as they both sought to claim the Iron Throne. Beyond his marriages, his bond with his dragon Caraxes reflected his own personality, fierce, unpredictable, and impossible to control. The dragon's reputation as a battle-hardened beast paralleled its rider's own image, and together they were a force to be reckoned with. His dragon played a critical role in the Civil War, its presence on the battlefield a symbol of the sheer power he commanded. His role in the Dance of the Dragons was pivotal. As a key leader of the Black Council, he brought both his military expertise and his unyielding determination to the war effort. He wasn't just a commander, though. His strategic mind helped shape the course of the conflict, influencing key battles and alliances. His actions during the war, particularly his relentless pursuit of victory, showed that his thirst for power was matched only by his willingness to fight for it. Ultimately, his legacy is one of both triumph and tragedy. He was a man who could have been king, but was always just out of reach. His ambitions drove much of the conflict in House of the Dragon, and though he may not have sat on the Iron Throne himself, his influence on the events of the Civil War was undeniable. His impact on Westerosi history is still felt long after the dragons stopped dancing, and his mythos as the Rogue Prince continues to captivate and intrigue. Now, we can't move any further in the House of the Dragon lore unless we go over the dragons involved in the conflict. The Dance of the Dragons was as much a war between humans as it was a war between dragons. These massive creatures, wielded as weapons of war by their riders, shaped the course of events in a way that no ordinary army could. In House of the Dragon, dragons aren't just beasts. They are characters in their own right, each with distinct personalities, histories, and roles in the conflict. Understanding their involvement is key to unraveling the war's progression and its devastating consequences for the Targaryen dynasty. At the heart of the conflict, Rhaenyra Targaryen's dragon, Syrax, stood as a symbol of her claim to the Iron Throne. Named after a Valyrian goddess, Syrax was a large and fiercely loyal dragon. Though not as aggressive in nature as some others, Syrax was swift and strong, making her an effective tool for Rhaenyra's campaign. Rhaenyra rode Syrax into many key moments during the war, including the defense of Dragonstone, her stronghold. The bond between Rhaenyra and Syrax was a testament to the unique connection between a Targaryen and their dragon, an almost mystical link that was forged from birth and solidified through years of riding together. But if Syrax was loyal and steadfast, then Caraxes, the dragon ridden by Daemon, was wild and fearsome. Known as the Bloodworm, Caraxes had a long and violent history even before the war began. Caraxes was a battle-hardened dragon, having been used in numerous skirmishes by Daemon. Caraxes' serpentine form and fiery temperament made him a dangerous opponent on the battlefield. Unlike Syrax, Caraxes was known for his ruthlessness, matching Daemon's personality perfectly. Together, they formed a deadly duo, capable of turning the tide of battle with their sheer presence. Caraxes was notorious for his brutality in combat, and his fiery breath, combined with his agility, made him one of the most formidable dragons in the war. On the other side of the conflict, Vhagar, the dragon ridden by Aegon II's brother Aemond, was perhaps the most feared dragon of the time. Vhagar was one of the oldest and largest dragons still living, having been ridden by legendary figures in Targaryen history, including Visenya Targaryen, one of the original conquerors of Westeros. Vhagar's sheer size and power made her a devastating force in any battle. In contrast to the more agile dragons like Syrax and Caraxes, Vhagar brought overwhelming strength to the battlefield, her fiery breath capable of destroying entire armies. Aemond, a skilled and aggressive rider, wielded Vhagar's power ruthlessly, using the dragon to strike fear into the hearts of Rhaenyra's supporters. Vhagar was not just a tool of war, she was an ancient symbol of Targaryen power, and her involvement in the conflict marked the passing of an era in which dragons ruled the skies. Sunfire, the dragon ridden by Aegon II, also played a crucial role in the Dance of the Dragons. Known for his striking golden scales, Sunfire was considered one of the most beautiful dragons ever seen. But beneath his beauty lay a fearsome and deadly beast. Aegon II's bond with Sunfire was strong, and together they were an intimidating force in the conflict. However, Sunfire's story is one of both triumph and tragedy. While initially a powerful asset for Aegon II, Sunfire was wounded in battle multiple times. His injuries, particularly during the war's later stages, reflect the toll the conflict took on the dragons themselves. Sunfire's resilience in the face of these injuries was legendary, yet his suffering also symbolized the slow destruction of the Targaryens' greatest power, their dragons. Beyond these key dragons, many others were involved in the war, each with its own story and significance. Meleys, the dragon ridden by Rhaenys Targaryen, also known as the Queen Who Never Was, played a vital role. Meleys was known for her speed and grace in the air, often called the Red Queen due to her scarlet scales. Her agility in battle made her a formidable opponent. Rhaenys and Meleys fought valiantly in several battles during the war, but like many dragons, they met a tragic end. The famous Battle at Rook's Rest saw Meleys fighting Vhagar and Sunfire in one of the most brutal dragon-on-dragon conflicts. The loss of Meleys and Rhaenys was a devastating blow to Rhaenyra's cause, demonstrating how critical these creatures were to the outcome of the war. The connection between dragon and rider was more than just physical. It was a bond of trust, loyalty, and, in many cases, destiny. Dragons were not simply mounts. They were partners in the fight for power. This bond was central to the Targaryens' ability to control their dragons, and it gave them a unique advantage in warfare. However, as much as dragons were assets, they also posed a great risk. Battles between dragons were chaotic and unpredictable, often leading to massive destruction and loss of life. The conflict known as the Dance of the Dragons is a stark reminder of this reality, where many of these once great creatures perished in the fire and fury of war. One of the most significant battles involving dragons was the Battle of the Gullet, where multiple dragons from both sides engaged in a fierce aerial conflict. The skies were filled with fire as the dragons clashed, their riders desperately trying to gain the upper hand. The sheer scale of the destruction caused by these creatures was unimaginable, and the aftermath of the battle left the realm in ruins. Dragon fire consumed entire armies, castles, and towns, leaving devastation in its wake. Yet, for all their power, dragons were not invincible. Many were slain during the Dance of the Dragons, either by other dragons or by the weapons of men. As the war dragged on, the number of dragons began to dwindle. By the end of the conflict, most of the dragons were either dead or gravely wounded. This loss of dragons was one of the war's most tragic consequences. For centuries, the Targaryens had relied on their dragons to maintain their power, and with each dragon that fell, their hold over Westeros weakened. The near extinction of dragons following the Dance of the Dragons marked the beginning of the end for the Targaryen dynasty's dominance. Without dragons, their political and military power was severely diminished, setting the stage for the eventual downfall of their house. The legacy of these dragons, however, lives on in the lore of Westeros. Syrax, Caraxes, Vhagar, Sunfire, Meleys, and others became legendary figures in their own right, their names echoing through the ages as symbols of a time when dragons ruled the skies. The Dance of the Dragons was not just a war between Targaryens, it was a war between their dragons, creatures whose sheer power reshaped the course of history. The loss of so many dragons in the war forever altered the balance of power in Westeros. The Targaryens, once invincible due to their dragon riders, were left vulnerable in a way they had never been before. This vulnerability would haunt the dynasty for generations, as the dragons that had once ensured their dominance were now gone, leaving behind only the stories of their might and the ruins they had left in their wake. Now that we have most of the characters of House of the Dragon established, it's time to dive into what really kicked this war off. One of the most tragic and mysterious figures in the lead-up to the Civil War is Laenor Velaryon. His life, marriage, and eventual disappearance had a profound impact on the political landscape of Westeros. Laenor's story is not just about personal struggles. It's about how his fate shaped the conflict that would engulf the realm. As Rhaenyra's first husband and a key figure in the Targaryen-Velaryon alliance, Laenor's influence on the war cannot be overlooked. Laenor Velaryon's marriage to Rhaenyra was more than just a union of two individuals. It was a strategic political move designed to strengthen the alliance between the two most powerful Valyrian houses in Westeros. The Targaryens had dragons, but the Velaryons controlled the seas. With this marriage, the two houses cemented their bond, ensuring that Rhaenyra would have not only the might of dragons, but also the naval superiority needed to secure her claim to the Iron Throne. The marriage symbolized a united front, combining the Targaryen firepower with Valyrian seafaring dominance. It was, by all accounts, a match that should have fortified Rhaenyra's path to the throne. However, this seemingly perfect political union was complicated by personal factors. Laenor was known to have little interest in his wife, a fact that was whispered throughout the court. His preference for the companionship of men was not a secret, and it cast a shadow over the marriage. Despite this, the two did their duty, and Rhaenyra bore children, though the legitimacy of those children would be called into question. the rumors surrounding the parentage of Rhaenyra's sons, Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey, became a significant point of contention in the war. Many believed that the boys were not Laena's biological children, but were fathered by Sir Harwin Strong, Rhaenyra's rumored lover. These rumors, whether true or not, weakened Rhaenyra's claim to the throne in the eyes of many lords, particularly those in the Green Council. This question of legitimacy was more than just a scandal. It was a political weapon. The Greens, who supported Aegon II's claim to the throne, used the rumors to undermine Rhaenyra's position. They argued that Rhaenyra's sons were not true Velaryons or Targaryens, and thus had no right to inherit the Iron Throne. The issue of the children's paternity added fuel to the already growing tensions between the Greens and the Blacks, turning what could have been a relatively straightforward succession into a bitter and deeply personal conflict. Laenor's personal struggles also had a direct impact on his political role. While he was a skilled warrior and a dragon rider, bonded to the dragon sea smoke, his lack of involvement in the political machinations of the court limited his influence. Unlike his father, Corlys Velaryon, who played a crucial role in shaping the events leading up to the war, Laenor seemed content to stay on the sidelines. His detachment from the political intrigue of the court created a void in Rhaenyra's support system, leaving her more vulnerable to the manipulations of her enemies. Then came the most mysterious and debated part of Laenor's story, his supposed death. According to official accounts, Laenor was murdered in a quarrel by his companion, Sir Carl Corray. However, this story has been met with widespread skepticism. Some believe that Laenor staged his own death and fled Westeros to start a new life across the Narrow Sea. This theory is supported by the fact that his body was never definitively identified, and the circumstances surrounding his death were suspiciously convenient for both him and Rhaenyra. If Laenor did indeed fake his death, it raises the question of why. Some suggest that he wanted to escape the pressures of his position and live freely without the constraints of his marriage or the demands of court politics. Others believe that Rhaenyra herself may have been involved in the plot, allowing Laenor to disappear so that she could remarry someone more politically advantageous, Daemon Targaryen. Whether or not Rhaenyra was involved, Laenor's disappearance or death allowed her to marry Daemon, a union that would significantly strengthen her position in the war. Theories about Laenor's survival also play into larger questions about loyalty and deception in the House of the Dragon. If Laenor did escape, it would suggest a level of manipulation and cunning that was previously unseen in his character. It would also imply that even in the midst of a brutal civil war, some figures were able to carve out their own destinies, away from the bloodshed and power struggles of the realm. Laenor's absence had far-reaching consequences for the Black Council. His death, whether real or staged, left a gap in the Velaryon-Targaryen alliance. While Corlys Velaryon remained loyal to Rhaenyra, the loss of his son undoubtedly strained their relationship. Furthermore, Laenor's removal from the political stage weakened Rhaenyra's claim, as the rumors surrounding the parentage of her children became even harder to refute without him by her side. The loss of Laenor also had a psychological impact on Rhaenyra. She had already endured the loss of her lover, Sir Harwin Strong, and now, with Laenor gone, she was left even more isolated. This isolation, coupled with the mounting pressures of the war, may have driven her closer to Daemon, whose own ambitions aligned with hers. The marriage between Rhaenyra and Daemon was not just a political necessity, it was also a personal alliance, born out of shared loss and ambition. Laenor's absence, therefore, played a crucial role in shaping Rhaenyra's decisions during the war. On a broader level, Laenor's fate reflects the tragic nature of the Dance of the Dragons. Many of the key figures in the war were not just casualties of battle. They were victims of the political and personal forces that shaped their lives. Laenor's story is a reminder that in House of the Dragon, the lines between personal and political are often blurred. His struggles with identity, duty, and loyalty mirror the larger conflicts at play in the Targaryen civil war. In the end, Laenor Velaryon's disappearance or death set off a chain of events that would have lasting repercussions for Westeros. His absence allowed Rhaenyra to remarry, which in turn solidified her position in the war. But it also left her vulnerable to the rumors and suspicions that would plague her claim to the throne. Laenor's fate, like much of the House of the Dragon lore, is shrouded in mystery, leaving fans and historians alike to speculate on what really happened to Rhaenyra Targaryen's first husband. Every great conflict needs alliances, and sometimes the most powerful ones are those you least expect. One of the most intriguing yet often overlooked alliances in House of the Dragon is the Pact of Ice and Fire. While it doesn't get the attention that dragons and battles do, it's a game changer that helped shape the war's outcome. This pact, formed between Rhaenyra's side and House Stark, laid the groundwork for a rare and powerful alliance between the fiery South and the icy North. It all started when Rhaenyra found herself in desperate need of strong allies. As her claim to the Iron Throne was being fiercely contested by the Green Council, she knew she needed more than just dragonfire to win. Enter Lord Cregan Stark, the Lord of Winterfell. While the Starks are famously distant from the southern squabbles of Westeros, they command a significant amount of respect and power. The North is vast, its armies resilient, and its loyalty, once given, is unwavering. Securing the North's support could tip the scales in Rhaenyra's favor, and that's exactly what the Pact of Ice and Fire was designed to do. The agreement was simple but clever. In exchange for the support of the North during the Civil War, Rhaenyra promised that her son, Jacaerys Velaryon, would marry a Stark daughter. This wasn't just a political move, it was a promise that bound the two great houses together for generations. The pact played on the Starks' deep-rooted values of honor and loyalty, making it more than just a marriage alliance. It was a contract forged in trust and blood. But why would the Starks get involved in this southern conflict at all? After all, they've been known to steer clear of the South's intrigues. The answer lies in the timing and the stakes. The North may have kept to itself for the most part, but it was not immune to the larger struggles of the realm. The Dance of the Dragons threatened to throw all of Westeros into chaos, and the Starks knew that staying neutral could leave them vulnerable to whichever side emerged victorious. Lord Cregan Stark was a pragmatic leader. He wasn't about to let the North be sidelined in such a crucial moment. By allying with Rhaenyra, he secured the North's place in the future of the realm, ensuring that his house would have a say in what came next. It's easy to overlook the significance of this pact because it doesn't involve flashy battles or dragonfire. But the Northern Alliance was a strategic coup for Rhaenyra. The North's commitment was more than just words. It meant men, supplies, and perhaps most importantly, the loyalty of one of Westeros's most honorable and feared houses. The Starks didn't fight for power, they fought for honor, and their support gave Rhaenyra's claim much-needed legitimacy. Now, let's talk about the long-term implications of this alliance. While the marriage between Jacaerys and the Stark daughter never came to pass due to Jacaerys' untimely death during the war, the bond between the two houses remained significant. In fact, this alliance helped to plant the seeds for future Targaryen-Stark relations. While House of the Dragon doesn't dive into this directly, we know that centuries later, the North would again play a pivotal role in Targaryen affairs. This pact can be seen as the beginning of a long-standing relationship between these two powerful houses, one that culminates in Jon Snow's connection to the Targaryen line in Game of Thrones. Another fascinating layer to this story is the nature of the Starks themselves. Known for their rigid sense of honor, the Starks wouldn't have agreed to this pact lightly. In Northern law, oaths and promises are held sacred, and for Cregan Stark to align with Rhaenyra, it shows the depth of respect he had for her cause. But there's also an element of Stark pragmatism here. While the North valued honor, they weren't above making smart political moves when necessary. The Pact of Ice and Fire wasn't just about honor, it was about survival. By aligning with Rhaenyra, Cregan Stark ensured that the North would remain a powerful and respected part of the realm, no matter who ended up on the Iron Throne. What's especially interesting about this pact is how little known it is, despite its massive implications. Many fans of House of the Dragon may not even realize that this alliance existed, yet it was one of the most crucial behind-the-scenes moves in the war. The Targaryens, with their dragons and political scheming, may have dominated the spotlight, but it's the quieter, more strategic moves like this one that often decide the outcome of wars. There are also some lesser-known theories and facts surrounding this alliance. One particularly intriguing theory is that the Starks may have had more influence in the war than is commonly believed. Some accounts suggest that Northern forces played a larger role in supporting Rhaenyra than is traditionally recorded, though much of this has been lost to history. Additionally, there are whispers in some corners of Westerosi history that Cregan Stark's involvement in the Civil War helped to cement the North's later status as a somewhat independent and fiercely guarded region within the realm. This autonomy, while not officially recognized, allowed the Starks to maintain a unique position in Westeros, always slightly apart from the politics of the South, while still holding immense influence. Looking at the future impact of this alliance, we can see that the Pact of Ice and Fire set a precedent for the way the Targaryens would view the North. While the war ultimately ended in tragedy for many involved, the connection between these two houses would remain. The Starks, with their quiet power and strategic importance, would never be far from the minds of future Targaryen rulers. The pact also represents a rare moment of unity between two houses with vastly different cultures. The fiery Targaryens from the south and the icy honor-bound Starks of the north. It's a reminder that in the Game of Thrones, alliances are sometimes built on more than just political convenience. They are built on mutual respect and necessity. In conclusion, the Pact of Ice and Fire was a critical yet understated move in the Dance of the Dragons. It helped Rhaenyra strengthen her cause, securing the North's loyalty and resources at a time when she needed them most. The long-term effects of this alliance can be felt throughout Westerosi history, and it laid the foundation for the complex relationship between the Targaryens and the Starks that would echo through the ages. While it may not involve the spectacle of dragonfire, the Pact of Ice and Fire remains one of the most fascinating and significant elements of the Targaryen-Stark story, and a perfect example of how even in the heat of war, the cold north can make all the difference. Some moments in history are like a match to dry kindling. They set everything ablaze. Lucerys Velaryon's death was exactly that for the Dance of the Dragons. It wasn't just the loss of a young prince. It was the spark that ignited one of the bloodiest wars Westeros had ever seen. And it all unfolded with a storm, a chase, and a dragon far too large for its rider to control. Lucerys, the son of Rhaenyra, was not initially meant to be a soldier in this war of succession. At just 14 years old, he was sent on a diplomatic mission to Storm's End to secure the loyalty of House Baratheon. His mother, Rhaenyra, sought to gather support for her claim to the Iron Throne, as the realm was already splitting into the Black Council supporting her, and the Green Council backing her half-brother, Aegon II. Lucerys' mission should have been simple enough, an attempt to secure alliances through diplomacy, not violence. But fate had other plans. A key detail that many overlook is that Lucerys wasn't just Rhaenyra's son. He was her eldest son by Laenor Velaryon, or at least that's how it appeared to the realm. The rumors of his true parentage, that he was in fact the son of Sir Harwin Strong, cast a shadow over his legitimacy and Rhaenyra's claim to the throne. These whispers had followed Lucerys all his life, making him the target of bitter resentment from those who sided with the Greens. Aemond, his uncle and rival, held a particular grudge. The tension between Lucerys and Aemond was not new. In fact, it stretched back to their childhood, when the two had clashed in the royal court. During one infamous altercation, Lucerys slashed Aemond's eye with a dagger, leaving him forever marked. Aemond, who now bore a sapphire in the place of his lost eye, never forgot that day. The scar wasn't just on his face, it was a wound that festered inside him, driving a desire for revenge that eventually came to a head at Storm's End. When Lucerys arrived at Storm's End, seeking Lord Boros Baratheon's support, he found himself not in the company of allies, but in the lair of a wolf. Aemond had already arrived, trying to secure the Baratheons' loyalty for the Greens. The tension between the two young men was palpable, made worse by Boros, who openly mocked Lucerys' offer of a marriage alliance compared to Aemond's more appealing proposal. The situation quickly turned from bad to worse when Aemond demanded that Lucerys gouge out his own eye as payment for their childhood scuffle. Here's where things took a tragic turn. Lucerys, knowing he was outmatched both in numbers and strength, refused and fled. But Aemond, riding the colossal dragon Vhagar, wasn't going to let him go so easily. Lucerys mounted his own dragon, Arax, and flew off into the storm. What followed was less a fight and more a deadly chase. Now, here's where the lore gets particularly interesting. Vhagar, Aemon's dragon, was one of the oldest and largest in Westeros, an ancient creature who had once fought in Aegon the Conqueror's campaigns. Arax, Lucerys' dragon, was no match in size or strength. Despite being far smaller, Arax was fast, darting through the storm clouds, trying to lose his much larger pursuer. But the skies were wild that night, with rain and lightning making the chase even more perilous. There's debate among maesters and historians over whether Aemond intended to kill Lucerys. Some argue that Aemond, known for his volatile nature, wanted only to scare the boy, to make him pay for the years of resentment he harbored. But whether it was deliberate or a tragic accident, what happened next set the entire realm ablaze. As the two dragons clashed above Storm's End, it was clear that Aemond had lost control of Vhagar. The massive dragon took matters into its own claws, tearing Arrax apart mid-flight. Lucerys, still strapped to his dragon, fell to his death in the sea below. The death of Lucerys was the first blood spilled in the civil war, and its consequences were immediate. When Rhaenyra heard the news of her son's death, she was devastated and furious. She had sent her son on a diplomatic mission, not to die in some storm. But beyond the personal loss, Lucerys' death had a political impact that cannot be overstated. It shattered any hope of a peaceful resolution between the two factions. Now, it was war. In the lore of House of the Dragon, the death of Lucerys is often cited as the true start of the Civil War, a point of no return, where both sides became irreversibly committed to seeing the other destroyed. The Black Council, led by Rhaenyra, was enraged by this act of aggression. The loss of her son transformed Rhaenyra from a strategic leader into a vengeful mother, willing to unleash the full power of her dragons on her enemies. On the other side, the Green Council now had to contend with the fact that one of their own had struck the first blow. This moment also marked a turning point for Aemond. The boy who once wanted revenge became a man consumed by his own actions. While some accounts suggest Aemond tried to cover up his involvement in Lucerys' death, claiming it was an accident, others believe he reveled in the chaos he had caused. Either way, this was not just the death of one prince, it was the death of any chance of peace. The fallout from Lucerys' death was immediate. Rhaenyra's supporters, enraged by the murder of their prince, rallied even more fiercely to her cause. This event also solidified the animosity between the Greens and the Blacks. There was no going back after Storm's End. The killing of a royal prince in such a brutal fashion escalated the war in ways no one could have foreseen. Another lesser-known aspect of this tragedy is how it impacted the dragons themselves. Arrax's death was the first of many dragon casualties in the war. As the dragons began to fall, the true cost of the civil war became apparent. The Targaryens, once defined by their control over these majestic creatures, would eventually see their dragons nearly wiped out by the end of the conflict. One intriguing theory that often goes unnoticed is the idea that the storm itself played a role in the tragedy. Some maesters speculate that had the weather been clear, Lucerys might have stood a better chance of evading Aemond. The storm clouds, however, blinded both dragon and rider, turning the sky into a deadly maze. It's almost as if nature itself conspired against the young prince that night, ensuring his death would be a catalyst for the bloody war to come. In the end, Lucerys Velaryon's death wasn't just the loss of a young boy, it was the beginning of the end for the Targaryen dynasty's golden age. His murder at the hands of Aemond, whether intentional or not, set the stage for a conflict that would tear Westeros apart. The dance of the dragons had begun, and no one would be spared from the devastation it would bring. There are places in Westeros that seem to carry the weight of every dark event that has ever transpired within their walls. The castle in question is one such place, a ruin that once aspired to be the greatest fortress ever built, but instead became a graveyard for ambition. Harrenhal, now an enduring symbol of ruin and tragedy, played a crucial role in the Targaryen civil war. Its importance went beyond its physical presence. It embodied the war's cycle of destruction. Originally constructed by Harren the Black to be impregnable, the castle was meant to represent the height of power and dominance. But just as it was completed, Aegon the Conqueror, atop Velaryon the Black Dread, reduced it to molten stone, beginning its long history as a place of misfortune. The legend surrounding the castle's supposed curse became one of the most enduring tales in the realm, and it was often said that anyone who claimed it would soon meet a grim end. And during the Dance of the Dragons, the curse seemed to play out once again. From a strategic perspective, the castle's location in the Riverlands made it invaluable to both the Greens and the Blacks during the Civil War. Controlling it meant controlling access to vital supply routes and a commanding position over the central regions of Westeros. For Daemon and his forces, taking the castle was a significant victory early in the conflict, providing a key foothold. But even in victory, the place retained its ominous reputation. Daemon set up camp within its scorched halls, but the shadow of the curse loomed. One of the most intriguing aspects of the place is the fact that, despite its tactical importance, every side that claimed it seemed to suffer misfortune shortly after. Some whisper that this isn't just coincidence, that there's something about the fortress itself that invites disaster. After Daemon's occupation, the stronghold eventually fell into the hands of the Greens, but control of it brought little advantage. The curse, it seems, was indifferent to which side held power. It's a recurring pattern in the castle's long and tragic history. Beyond its strategic value, the lore surrounding the stronghold adds layers of mystery to the Civil War. Many lords who took residence there met untimely ends. The deeper one looks into the history of this castle. The more stories surface about strange occurrences and disappearances. Some even believe that the curse could be tied to its proximity to the mystical god's eye lake. Whether through military disaster or unexplained phenomena, the place seemed to exact a toll on those who sought to use it for their own purposes. One of the lesser-known accounts from the war tells of the fortress being used as a prison for high-profile captives. Its vast, empty halls were perfect for holding prisoners of war. However, some of those prisoners were found dead under mysterious circumstances. It's said that no one who entered those halls truly felt safe, not even the captors. Perhaps this was part of the curse's reach, extending its influence over all who entered its gates, regardless of their intentions. Control of the fortress shifted multiple times throughout the conflict, with both factions briefly holding it, only to lose it again. It became less a prize and more of a burden, with each side unable to hold on to it for long. Every new lord who claimed it thought they could be the one to break the pattern, but the cycle continued, mirroring the broader war's unrelenting devastation. The fortress's blackened walls bore witness to countless deaths, both from battle and from whatever curse lingered in its stone. By the time the Civil War neared its end, the significance of the place as a strategic stronghold had all but faded, overshadowed by its reputation for misfortune. It had been a key point in the early stages of the war, but as the conflict dragged on, the dark legacy of the castle seemed to weigh heavier on those who held it than any military advantage it offered. The once grand ambitions of those who fought over it had crumbled, much like its molten towers. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of its role in the war is how it mirrors the broader tragedy of the Targaryens themselves. Just as the great house tore itself apart from within, the castle's curse seemed to tear apart anyone who sought to claim it. The dragons in the sky may have been the most visible symbols of destruction, but on the ground, this ruined castle was quietly wreaking its own kind of havoc. The story of Harrenhal isn't just one of battles fought and won. It's the story of ambition laid low by forces beyond control, forces that some claim are supernatural. And even if one doesn't believe in curses, the pattern of ruin is hard to ignore. Every family that has taken up residence within its walls has fallen, and the Dance of the Dragons was no exception. For the Targaryens, holding the castle may have offered strategic advantage, but the price they paid was far higher than they could have anticipated. What makes this place so enduring in the lore of Westeros is that it stands as a constant reminder that not all battles are fought with swords and dragons. Some battles are fought against the very places we seek to control, and in this case, the fortress itself may have been the deadliest opponent of all. The shadow that hung over the castle during the Civil War was as thick and impenetrable as the fog that often cloaked its walls. As the war drew to a close, the haunting legacy of the fortress remained. Long after the last dragon took flight from its melted battlements, the stories of the curse persisted. To this day, the stronghold is considered cursed, its blackened walls serving as a reminder of the ambition that built it, the dragons that burned it, and the lives that were lost trying to hold it. The fall of this castle wasn't just a military defeat. It was the fall of hope for anyone who thought they could escape the curse that had clung to its stones for generations. In the end, the legacy of this ruined fortress is a testament to the larger tragedy of the Civil War itself. A war fought not just for power, but for control over a realm that seemed determined to destroy those who sought to rule it. And in the center of it all stood this cursed castle, watching as yet another generation of would-be rulers fell to ruin. When we talk about the lore of House of the Dragon, certain moments stand out, not just for their brutality, but for the lasting impact they have on the people and the war itself. And no event embodies this more than the chilling tale of blood and cheese. The violent assassination of Aegon II's young son is a defining moment, not just in the history of the war, but in the psychological unraveling of both factions. It's a dark tale of revenge that continues to echo through Westerosi history, showing just how far the thirst for power and vengeance can go. At the heart of this story is pure, calculated revenge. After the death of Lucerys Velaryon at Storm's End, it was clear that no act would go unanswered. Daemon, Lucerys' uncle, made sure of that. His fury over his nephew's death burned brighter than the flames of any dragon, and he sought to hurt his enemies in the most personal way imaginable. But what Daemon planned wasn't just about killing, it was about sending a message. His decision to use two low-born assassins, Blood and Cheese, for this plot added a level of cold calculation that makes this event all the more terrifying. Who were Blood and Cheese? Their names evoke the kind of fear that keeps people up at night, but their backgrounds are often overlooked in favor of the horrifying act they carried out. Blood, a former member of the City Watch, knew the ins and outs of King's Landing, including how to slip into the Red Keep unnoticed. Cheese, a rat catcher with access to the castle's hidden passageways, was the perfect accomplice. Together, they were able to navigate the labyrinthine corridors of the keep, and reach the royal family without raising suspicion. Their lower social standing made them virtually invisible. Yet this invisibility allowed them to commit one of the most shocking crimes in Westerosi history. The assassination of Aegon's son wasn't just about spilling blood, it was about psychological warfare. When Blood and Cheese infiltrated the Red Keep, they cornered Queen Helaena and her children. What followed was a scene of pure horror. The assassins forced Helaena to choose which of her children would die, knowing that no matter her choice, she would be haunted for the rest of her life. This wasn't just revenge. It was the systematic destruction of a family's psyche. In the end, she chose her younger son, Maelor, but it was her elder son, Jaehaerys, who was brutally murdered before her eyes. The political and psychological consequences of this assassination were immediate. For Aegon II, the murder of his child was a devastating blow, not just personally, but in terms of his standing as king. The message was clear. His throne was not secure, and his enemies would stop at nothing to tear his family apart. But it wasn't just Aegon who felt the effects. This act also sent shockwaves through the Black Council. Daemon's decision to employ such brutal tactics set a dangerous precedent. The war, which had already been vicious, now took a darker turn, with both sides escalating their violence and cruelty. Blood and Cheese were not motivated by loyalty or a desire for power. They were tools of vengeance, unleashed by Daemon to strike at the heart of his enemies. What makes their actions so terrifying is the cold, detached way they carried out their orders. Unlike the dragons and armies that clashed on the battlefield, this assassination was intimate, personal, and psychological. It was a reminder that even in a world of dragons, it's the actions of men, lowborn, overlooked, and underestimated, that can change the course of history. The lore surrounding Blood and Cheese often overlooks their ultimate fates, but their legacy is just as important as their crime. After the assassination, the two assassins vanished into the shadows of King's Landing. Some accounts suggest that Blood was eventually captured and executed, while others believe both assassins managed to escape, blending back into the underworld from which they came. Regardless of what happened to them, their names became synonymous with fear, a cautionary tale whispered in the streets of the capital for years to come. But beyond the immediate fallout of this assassination, the murder of Jaehaerys also had a profound effect on the overall trajectory of the Civil War. It escalated the conflict to new levels of barbarity, as both the Greens and Blacks began employing increasingly ruthless methods to achieve victory. The personal became political, and the once somewhat traditional rules of engagement dissolved into chaos. The war became not just about who would sit on the Iron Throne, but who could destroy their enemies in the most complete and final way. Queen Helaena herself never recovered from that night. The loss of her son shattered her, and she became a shell of the woman she once was. The trauma she endured haunted her until her tragic death not long after. This act of revenge didn't just kill a boy. It destroyed a mother, a family, and the fragile semblance of civility that had once governed the war. What's often missed in the broader retelling of this event is the ripple effect it had on the psyche of both the court and the small folk. This was a war that had been fought with dragons, knights, and banners. But Blood and Cheese showed that no one, not even the royal family, was safe. The fear they instilled spread like wildfire. If assassins could breach the Red Keep and murder a prince in front of his mother, what hope did anyone else have? The concept of safety, even behind the walls of the most secure fortress in the realm, was shattered. One lesser-known theory that adds another layer of intrigue to this tale is the idea that Blood and Cheese may not have acted purely out of loyalty to Daemon. Some believe that they had their own personal vendettas against the crown and saw this mission as a way to exact their own form of justice. Blood's connection to the City Watch and Cheese's knowledge of the Red Keep's passageways suggest that both men had spent years observing the royals from the shadows. They may have seen this assassination not just as a job, but as a chance to strike at the very heart of the ruling class that had oppressed them. In the end, the assassination of Jaehaerys was more than just an isolated act of violence. It was a turning point. It transformed the war from a battle for the Iron Throne into a blood feud, where the pain inflicted on one side was met with an even greater atrocity from the other. Blood and Cheese may have vanished into obscurity, but their actions left an indelible mark on the Targaryen civil war. Their dark legacy serves as a reminder of just how far people are willing to go when they've been pushed to the brink, and how even in a world of kings and dragons, it's often the small, overlooked figures who hold the most power to change the course of history. The story of Blood and Cheese is one that lingers in the shadows of House of the Dragon, a stark reminder that revenge, once unleashed, has a way of spiraling into something far more monstrous than anyone could have anticipated. Now, it's finally time to talk about the character who stole all our hearts on screen in House of the Dragon, Alicent Hightower. Whether you love her, sympathize with her, or find her actions divisive, one thing is certain: Alicent's story is as complicated as they come. She isn't just the mother of Aegon II or the queen by marriage. She's the force that quietly but effectively changes the course of history. Her rise from noble woman to the most powerful woman in the realm is a tale of strategy, loyalty, and ambition. And in the end, her actions ripple far beyond the walls of King's Landing, plunging the realm into chaos. Alicent's journey began long before she ever became queen. Born to Otto Hightower, a shrewd and influential hand of the king, she grew up surrounded by the complexities of court politics. While much of her early life was spent in the shadows of her father's ambition, it didn't take long for Alicent to develop her own political acumen. As a young woman, she served as a caretaker to the elderly King Jaehaerys, the first Targaryen, where she learned the subtleties of navigating the treacherous waters of the royal court. Some say her time with the aging king sharpened her instincts and prepared her for the power struggles to come. But Alicent's rise to true prominence came when she caught the eye of King Viserys I. After the tragic death of Viserys' first wife, Queen Aemma, the king sought comfort and companionship, and Otto Hightower seized the opportunity. He maneuvered his daughter into the king's favor, and soon enough, Alicent became queen. What's interesting here is that while her marriage to Viserys was certainly advantageous for her father, Alicent's own ambitions began to take root. She wasn't just a pawn in Otto's game. She had her own goals, her own path. The marriage to Viserys shifted the power dynamics of the court. As queen, Alicent's influence over the king grew, and with it, her role in shaping the future of the realm. But as she gained power, tensions began to simmer beneath the surface. The seeds of discord were sown in her relationship with Rhaenyra Targaryen, the king's daughter from his first marriage. Early on, the two women were close, but as time passed, their bond frayed. Alicent's ambitions for her own children, particularly Aegon II, brought her into direct conflict with Rhaenyra, who had been named heir to the Iron Throne. The rivalry between Alicent and Rhaenyra became one of the most significant factors leading to the Targaryen Civil War. Alicent, representing the Green Council, supported her son's claim to the throne, while Rhaenyra, backed by the Black Council, fought to secure her place as the rightful heir. This division not only splintered the royal family, but also dragged the entire realm into a bloody conflict. What started as personal ambition quickly evolved into a war for the future of Westeros. It's easy to view Alicent as an antagonist in Rhaenyra's story, but the truth is far more nuanced. Alicent wasn't simply scheming for power. She genuinely believed that her son had the stronger claim to the throne. In her mind, she was protecting her family and ensuring the stability of the realm. The rules of succession had always favored men, and in supporting Aegon II, Alicent was upholding that tradition. Her actions were driven not just by personal ambition, but by a belief in the natural order of things. One of the most fascinating aspects of Alicent's character is the way she operates behind the scenes. While some figures in House of the Dragon use brute force or fiery dragons to get their way, Alicent relies on intellect and strategy. She knows how to work the political machinery of the court, pulling strings and forging alliances without ever appearing overtly threatening. Her power comes from her ability to influence others, from her husband to the lords of Westeros. In many ways, Alicent embodies the idea that true power often lies in subtlety. A pivotal moment in Alicent's rise came when King Viserys fell ill. As the king's health deteriorated, Alicent found herself in a delicate position. Viserys had named Rhaenyra as his heir, but with the king growing weaker by the day, the question of succession became increasingly urgent. Alicent, ever the strategist, began to position herself and her son for the inevitable power struggle. This is where we see her true ambition come to the forefront. She didn't just sit idly by, waiting for events to unfold. She acted, making moves to secure her family's future. Of course, Alicent didn't work alone. Her father, Otto, was a key player in advancing her ambitions. But as time went on, it became clear that Alicent had outgrown her father's influence. She was no longer the young girl being groomed for court. She was a queen in her own right, with her own agenda. This evolution is one of the most compelling aspects of Alicent's story. She transforms from a pawn into a player, and by the time the Civil War begins, she's fully in control of her own destiny. What's often overlooked in discussions of Alicent's character is the immense pressure she faced. As queen, she was expected to uphold the traditions of the realm, protect her children, and navigate the treacherous politics of King's Landing. The stakes were incredibly high, and any misstep could have led to disaster. In many ways, Alicent's story is one of survival. Survival in a world that was constantly trying to tear her down. Her choices weren't always the right ones, but they were driven by a deep desire to protect her family and secure their future. The rivalry between Alicent and Rhaenyra eventually came to a head with the outbreak of the Dance of the Dragons. This civil war tore the realm apart, and Alicent's role in its origins cannot be overstated. She was the driving force behind the Green Council's support for Aegon II, and her influence helped shape the course of the war. But while Alicent may have been one of the architects of the conflict, she wasn't immune to its consequences. The war brought unimaginable suffering to both sides, and by the end, the realm was left in ruins. Alicent's story is a tragic one. She rose to power through her intelligence and ambition, but that same ambition ultimately contributed to the destruction of the realm she sought to protect. Her legacy is complex, marked by both her successes and her failures. But one thing is certain: Alicent Hightower was a woman who refused to be overlooked or dismissed. She played the Game of Thrones with all the skill and cunning of any man, and her rise to power is a testament to her strength and determination. As we delve deeper into the events that led to the Dance of the Dragons, Alicent's role becomes even more pivotal. She wasn't just a queen, she was a force of nature, shaping the fate of Westeros in ways that few others could. Her story reminds us that in the world of House of the Dragon, power isn't always about dragons and swords. Sometimes it's about the quiet, calculated moves of those who understand the true nature of the game. And in that sense, Alicent Hightower was one of the most powerful players of them all. And of course, we can't mention the Hightower name without giving Otto his credit. While Alicent certainly rose to power and influence, much of her path was laid out by none other than her father, Otto Hightower. Cold, calculating, and relentless, Otto was the man pulling the strings behind the scenes. His ambition wasn't just about family legacy, it was about power, control, and ensuring his bloodline supremacy. Otto's legacy as Hand of the King is one of subtle manipulation, a masterclass in how to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics with ruthless precision. He is, without question, one of the most important figures in shaping the events that led to the Targaryen Civil War. Otto Hightower's rise to power didn't happen overnight. He came from a family of great wealth and influence, with House Hightower being one of the oldest and most powerful houses in Westeros. The Hightowers were known for their vast wealth and strategic marriages, and Otto was no exception to this tradition. As a young man, he climbed the political ladder through his wit and ambition, but it was his ability to insert himself into the right places at the right times that truly defined his career. He served as Hand of the King not once, but twice, which is a testament to his political skill. His first stint as Hand of the King was under Jaehaerys I, a reign marked by peace and prosperity. Otto's experience during this period gave him the foundation to understand not just how to manage a kingdom, but how to influence it. By the time he returned as Hand to Viserys I, he had already learned the art of political maneuvering. What makes Otto such a compelling character isn't just his thirst for power, it's his ability to play the long game. He wasn't after a quick win. He was after lasting dominance for his family, and he was willing to do whatever it took to achieve that. One of Otto's most significant moves was positioning his daughter, Alicent, to become queen. It's easy to see this as a simple case of a father wanting the best for his child. But Otto's ambitions went far beyond mere titles. He saw Alicent's marriage to Viserys as the key to securing the future of House Hightower, and through Alicent, he hoped to place his grandson, Aegon II, on the Iron Throne. This wasn't about love or loyalty. It was about ensuring that his family held the ultimate power in Westeros. In many ways, Alicent's rise to power was as much Otto's victory as it was hers. What sets Otto apart from other players in the House of the Dragon saga is his calculated coldness. He wasn't a man ruled by passion or emotion. His every move was meticulously planned. When Viserys named Rhaenyra as his heir, Otto didn't immediately move against the decision. Instead, he bided his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He knew that Viserys was a king who wanted peace and stability, and Otto played into that, presenting himself as the steady hand that could guide the realm. But all the while he was carefully laying the groundwork for a future where Aegon would take the throne. Of course, Otto wasn't without his setbacks. His ambitions often put him at odds with other key figures at court. When Viserys married Alicent, there were whispers that Otto was manipulating the king, using his daughter as a pawn. Some believed that he was too heavy-handed in his approach, and at one point, Viserys even dismissed him from his role as hand. But even this didn't deter Otto. He knew that his influence over Alicent would keep him close to the heart of power, and sure enough, he returned to his role as hand not long after. One of the most fascinating aspects of Otto's character is his relationship with Alicent. While many fathers in Westeros sought to control their daughters, Otto's bond with Alicent was more complex. He certainly guided her and pushed her toward his own goals, but he also recognized her intelligence and her ability to play the game in her own right. As much as Otto influenced Alicent, she too became a key player in her own rise to power. The dynamic between father and daughter is one of mutual ambition, where both understand the stakes and are willing to make sacrifices to achieve their goals. When the time finally came for Otto to make his move, he didn't hesitate. After Viserys' death, the stage was set for the civil war that would tear the realm apart. Otto was the driving force behind the Green Council, rallying the support for Aegon II's claim to the throne. His political strategies during this period were nothing short of ruthless. He knew that the only way to secure his family's future was to act quickly and decisively, even if it meant betraying the wishes of the late king. Otto's manipulation of the lords and ladies of Westeros ensured that Aegon II would be crowned, setting the stage for the bloody conflict that followed. One lesser-known but fascinating aspect of Otto's character is how he handled his rivals. While many in his position would have sought to eliminate their enemies outright, Otto preferred to neutralize them through more subtle means. Whether it was by undermining their influence at court or quietly turning their allies against them, Otto had a way of disarming his opponents without ever drawing a sword. This ability to wield power without overt displays of violence is part of what made him such a formidable figure. It's also why many underestimated him, to their own peril. Otto's ambitions for Aegon II were not without cost. The civil war that followed Viserys' death devastated the realm, and the Hightower name became synonymous with the bloody conflict. Yet, Otto's influence didn't fade. Even as the war raged on, he continued to pull the strings, guiding Aegon's decisions and ensuring that the Hightowers remained at the center of power. But as with all those who play the Game of Thrones, Otto's ambitions eventually caught up with him. The very power he sought to secure for his family became the source of their downfall, as the war took a toll on everyone involved. In the end, Otto Hightower's legacy is a complicated one. He was a man of immense intelligence and ambition, a master of court politics who shaped the fate of Westeros in ways few others could. Yet his relentless pursuit of power came at a cost, not just to himself, but to the entire realm. The civil war that he helped ignite tore families apart, plunged the realm into chaos, and left a legacy of blood and destruction. Otto's story is a reminder that in the pursuit of power, there are no clean victories, only sacrifices. And for Otto Hightower, the ultimate price of his ambition was the very future he sought to secure. Otto's rise to power and his role in the Dance of the Dragons is one of the most fascinating arcs in House of the Dragon. He wasn't just a supporting character in the background. He was the architect of many of the key events that shaped the war. His ambition, his strategic mind, and his willingness to do whatever it took to secure his family's future make him one of the most compelling figures in the lore of Westeros. While his actions may have led to untold devastation, there's no denying that Otto Hightower was a man who understood the game and played it to win. Now you might be asking yourself, how did we even end up at the Dance of the Dragons? Enter King Viserys I, a man with the best of intentions who sought to rule with a steady hand and keep the realm at peace. On paper, his reign should have been remembered as one of the more prosperous periods in Westeros. But beneath the surface, the very decisions he made, decisions meant to avoid conflict, became the tinder that ignited one of the bloodiest wars the realm had ever seen. Viserys' legacy is proof that even the most peaceful kings can sow the seeds of chaos if they fail to manage the people closest to them. Viserys came into power during a time of relative calm. He inherited a kingdom still basking in the glory of his grandfather, Jaehaerys I, and for much of his reign, Viserys tried to emulate the stability that his predecessors had achieved. He wasn't a warrior king. Instead, he was known for his diplomacy, his love of feasts, and a genuine desire to be liked by his subjects. Viserys had no grand ambitions for conquest or power grabs. His focus was on maintaining the peace and ensuring that the realm continued to thrive. But Viserys' desire to keep the peace led him down a dangerous path. His reluctance to confront the growing tensions between his daughter Rhaenyra and his second wife Alicent slowly began to tear the realm apart from within. The king's decision to name Rhaenyra as his heir was, at first, a progressive and decisive move. In a world dominated by male rulers, Viserys boldly declared that his daughter, not his sons or grandsons, would sit the Iron Throne after him. It was a groundbreaking moment in Westeros, a decision that should have been remembered as one of the most forward-thinking moves in history. But as time passed, it became clear that this decision was more complicated than Viserys had anticipated. By naming Rhaenyra his heir, Viserys set the stage for a bitter power struggle. While he believed in her right to rule, he failed to ensure that the court, the lords, and even his own family fully accepted her claim. Viserys underestimated the deep-seated traditions of Westeros, where many believed that the Iron Throne could only pass to a male heir. And when he married Alicent Hightower and had sons by her, those tensions bubbled to the surface, threatening the very peace he had worked so hard to maintain. It wasn't just a political battle, though. It was personal. Viserys adored Rhaenyra, his only child by his first wife, Aemma Arryn. He doted on her, raised her to believe she was the rightful heir, and gave her Dragonstone as her seat. In many ways, Rhaenyra was the daughter of his heart, the one he saw as his true legacy. But when Alicent entered the picture, things became messy. Alicent gave him sons, something that Westeros valued deeply. And suddenly, the line of succession became murky. His wife and his daughter became embroiled in a rivalry that would eventually split the court, the kingdom, and even the royal family itself. For all of his good intentions, Viserys made one critical error. He was a king who avoided conflict at all costs. He believed that by staying neutral in the brewing tension between Rhaenyra and Alicent, the issue would resolve itself, but it didn't. Instead, the court became divided into two powerful factions: the Green Council, backing Alicent and her son Aegon II, and the Black Council, supporting Rhaenyra's claim. Viserys tried to straddle the line to be the peacemaker, but his reluctance to confront the problem head-on only made things worse. Viserys's reign is marked by moments of internal conflict, small, seemingly insignificant choices that spiraled into much larger issues. Take, for instance, his relationship with Daemon, his younger brother. The two brothers had a complicated bond, to say the least. Viserys loved his brother but never fully trusted him. Daemon was reckless, unpredictable, and always hungry for power. Viserys was forced to repeatedly exile and forgive Daemon throughout his reign, never quite able to decide whether his brother was an ally or a threat. This inability to make a firm decision regarding Daemon only added to the instability of his rule. And while Daemon ultimately became a key figure in Rhaenyra's faction, his unchecked ambition made him a volatile player in the growing conflict. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of Viserys' story is his relationship with Alicent. Initially, their marriage seemed to be one of genuine affection, and Viserys likely believed that marrying Alicent would bring stability to the realm. However, Alicent's ambitions, fueled in part by her father Otto Hightower, slowly began to clash with Viserys's wishes. Otto, who had been the hand of the king, was a master manipulator, always pushing Alicent to secure her son's future. While Viserys tried to brush off these pressures, it became clear that Alicent was not content to let Rhaenyra take the throne. She had her own ambitions for her children, and those ambitions would lead to the civil war that Viserys so desperately wanted to avoid. What makes Viserys such a tragic figure is that he was caught in the middle of a game he never wanted to play. He wasn't like the ruthless rulers of Westeros who thrived on conflict and power struggles. Viserys genuinely wanted peace, but his inability to see the full consequences of his decisions meant that he couldn't stop the war that was brewing. His attempt to balance his love for his daughter with his duty to his new family was noble, but ultimately it created more division than unity. Viserys tried to please everyone, and in doing so, pleased no one. In the end, Viserys' reign became a paradox. He was called the Peacemaker, yet his decisions directly led to the bloodiest conflict in Targaryen history. His choice to name Rhaenyra as heir should have marked a new era of progress in Westeros, but instead it ignited a civil war that would tear the realm apart. His reluctance to intervene in the growing rivalry between Rhaenyra and Alicent allowed the tension to fester, creating two factions that would eventually fight for control of the Iron Throne. Viserys is a reminder that sometimes even the best intentions can lead to disaster. He was a king who wanted nothing more than for his family to live in harmony, but the very choices he made ensured that harmony was never possible. His reign was peaceful, yes, but that peace was an illusion, a fragile balance that shattered the moment Viserys was no longer there to hold it together. When we look at Viserys' legacy, it's not one of conquest or great victories. It's a legacy of choices, of trying to be a father, a husband, and a king all at once, and realizing too late that those roles couldn't always coexist. His decision to name Rhaenyra as his heir, while revolutionary, ultimately led to the division that set Westeros on a path to war. And yet, Viserys remains one of the most human figures in House of the Dragon. He wasn't a villain or a conqueror. He was a man who wanted peace, but was caught in the middle of forces far beyond his control. Now, let's talk about a marriage that was as powerful as it was tragic. The union between Laenor Velaryon and Prince Daemon. This wasn't just any match. It brought together two of the most formidable families in Westeros, the Velaryons and the Targaryens. On paper, it was a political powerhouse, uniting dragons and naval supremacy under one banner. But as with many stories in House of the Dragon, fate had other plans. Laenor Velaryon was more than just the daughter of the wealthiest man in Westeros. She was one of the rare few women to ride a dragon, and not just any dragon, Vhagar, one of the most feared creatures of her time. Laenor's bond with Vhagar spoke to her strength and fearlessness, and it placed her in a league of her own. Riding the oldest and most powerful dragon of her time, she cemented her status as a key player in the Targaryen-Velaryon alliance. But her life, like so many others in this saga, was cut tragically short, and the ripple effects of her death were felt across the Seven Kingdoms. Laenor's marriage to Daemon was not just about love or political advantage. It represented a merger of power that could shape the future of Westeros. Daemon, known for his wild ambition and cunning, was both feared and admired throughout the realm. By marrying Laenor, Daemon gained more than a partner. He secured an alliance with the Velaryons and, by extension, their immense fleet. But their marriage wasn't without complications, and Laenor's death in childbirth, along with the loss of their son Balon, left Daemon with a void that would shape his actions in the coming years. Laenor's life was one of action and adventure. Even before her marriage to Daemon, she had built a reputation as one of the few female dragon riders to be taken seriously in Westerosi politics. She was a figure of both beauty and strength, admired for her poise, but also feared for the sheer might of Vhagar, the dragon she controlled. Laenor's bond with her dragon wasn't just symbolic, it was a testament to her indomitable spirit. In a world dominated by men, Laenor's control over Vhagar set her apart, making her a force to be reckoned with. Her marriage to Daemon was seen as a strategic move by both families, but for Laenor, it also represented a personal triumph. She had secured a position of power alongside one of the most notorious figures in Westeros. Together, they were an unstoppable force until tragedy struck. Laenor's death during childbirth was a devastating blow, not only to Daemon but to the entire political landscape of Westeros. The loss of their son, Balon, only compounded the tragedy, leaving Daemon without a direct heir from his beloved Laenor. Laenor's bond with Vhagar played a critical role in her legacy. Vhagar, once the dragon of Visenya Targaryen, was the largest and most formidable creature alive at the time. For Laenor to command such a dragon was no small feat, and it symbolized her power and influence. With Vhagar by her side, Laenor was more than just a wife or mother. She was a key player in the grand chess game of Westeros. Her control over Vhagar was an important factor in the political calculations of the time. A dragon like Vhagar could tip the balance in any conflict, and with Laenor gone, Daemon lost a crucial ally in his campaign to secure power. The death of Laenor and Balon changed Daemon. Known for his ruthless ambition, Daemon was not a man easily swayed by emotion, but the loss of his wife and child, left a mark on him that would shape his actions moving forward. His marriage to Laenor had given him legitimacy and influence, but her death left him untethered, free to pursue his own goals without the constraints of family life. In many ways, Laenor's passing set Daemon on a darker path, one where his actions became even more unpredictable and his thirst for power more insatiable. Laenor's death also had political ramifications beyond Daemon's personal grief. Her marriage to Daemon had solidified the alliance between House Velaryon and House Targaryen, but with her gone, that bond was weakened. Corlys Velaryon, Laenor's father, still held significant power, but the loss of his daughter created a rift in the family's relationship with Daemon. The political landscape of Westeros is shaped as much by personal relationships as it is by battles and alliances, and Laenor's death disrupted the delicate balance of power that had been carefully cultivated through her marriage. The story of Laenor and Balon is a reminder that even in a world of dragons, castles, and political intrigue, the personal tragedies of individuals can have far-reaching consequences. Laenor was more than just a political pawn. She was a powerful figure in her own right, and her death marked a turning point in the events leading up to the Dance of the Dragons. The loss of her child, Balon, added another layer of tragedy to an already complex and volatile situation, leaving Daemon with nothing but his ambition and a deep well of grief. The marriage of Laenor and Daemon was a union of two powerful families, one built on the foundation of dragon fire and naval supremacy. But as with many things in the world of House of the Dragon, the tragedy that followed them serves as a reminder that even the strongest alliances can crumble under the weight of personal loss. Laenor's life was one of power and influence, but her death left a void that would shape the events to come, pushing Daemon further into the political fray and leaving the realm with one less dragon rider in the battle for the Iron Throne. Ultimately, Laenor's story is one of potential unfulfilled. She could have been a major player in the Dance of the Dragons, with Vhagar at her side and the might of House Velaryon backing her. Instead, her tragic death left a vacuum, one that was quickly filled by chaos and conflict. Her bond with Vhagar, her marriage to Daemon, and her position as a dragon rider all pointed to a life of immense power and influence. But in the end, the only legacy she left behind was one of loss. Loss for her family, loss for her house, and loss for the realm. As we continue to explore the lore of House of the Dragon, Laenor's story serves as a stark reminder that even those who seem destined for greatness can be struck down by fate. Her death and the death of her son Balon cast a shadow over the Targaryen dynasty, one that would linger as the war for the Iron Throne drew ever closer. Now, let's dive into one of the most intriguing figures in House of the Dragon, Sir Criston Cole, also known as the Kingmaker. Sir Criston didn't start off as royalty or even highborn, but somehow he managed to weave his way into the very fabric of Westeros' most devastating conflict. A simple knight with humble beginnings, he became one of the most influential figures in the Dance of the Dragons. And let's be honest, anyone who can earn a title like Kingmaker deserves our attention. Criston's story begins far from the grandeur of castles and dragon lords. He was born the son of a steward to a minor house in the Dornish Marches, a far cry from the power and prestige that surrounded the Targaryens. Despite his low birth, Criston had something that couldn't be ignored: skill with a sword. His talents quickly set him apart, earning him a place among the greatest knights of his time. But it wasn't just his swordsmanship that caught people's attention. It was his charm, his ambition, and the way he navigated the often treacherous waters of Westerosi court life. As a young knight, Criston first rose to prominence when he won a tournament, catching the eye of none other than Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen. At the time, Rhaenyra was the heir to the Iron Throne, and Criston was soon appointed as her personal protector in the Kingsguard. Their relationship quickly became the subject of much speculation. Was it strictly professional? Or was there something more between the princess and her handsome knight? The whispers grew louder as their bond deepened, and for a time it seemed Criston would be a loyal supporter of Rhaenyra's claim to the throne. But here's where things get messy, because House of the Dragon never delivers a simple, straightforward tale. Criston's loyalty took a sharp turn. Somewhere along the way, something changed, and Criston found himself no longer in Rhaenyra's camp, but backing her half-brother, Aegon II. This sudden shift is one of the biggest mysteries surrounding Criston's character. Was it a matter of personal betrayal? Did he see something in Rhaenyra that made him question her fitness to rule? Or was it simply a calculated political move? Whatever the reason, Criston's decision to throw his weight behind Aegon set the stage for one of the bloodiest civil wars in Westeros. Once aligned with Aegon II, Criston's rise to power was meteoric. He became the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, a position that placed him at the very heart of the court's machinations. His influence grew to the point where he wasn't just protecting a king, he was making one. It was Criston who crowned Aegon as king, defying Rhaenyra's claim and setting the stage for the bitter rivalry that would tear the realm apart. The moment Criston placed the crown on Aegon's head, he earned his infamous title, the Kingmaker. Criston's betrayal of Rhaenyra didn't just change the course of the war, it changed the very dynamics of the Targaryen dynasty. With Aegon on the throne, Rhaenyra's supporters were enraged and the lines were drawn. The civil war that followed would see many of Criston's decisions play a pivotal role in shaping the conflict. As the Kingmaker, Criston wasn't just a knight anymore. He was a player in the grand game of thrones. But being a Kingmaker came at a cost. Criston's name became synonymous with treachery, and his actions during the Dance of the Dragons earned him as many enemies as they did allies. He led Aegon's forces into battle, proving himself a formidable strategist, but his influence didn't always bring about the results he wanted. Key battles, like the First Battle of Tumbleton, showcase Criston's tactical mind, but they also reveal the cracks in his once ironclad reputation. The war dragged on, and as it did, the weight of his choices began to press down on him. One of the most fascinating aspects of Criston's story is his complexity. On the one hand, he was loyal to Aegon, standing by the young king even when the odds were against them. On the other hand, his betrayal of Rhaenyra casts a long shadow over his legacy. Was he truly serving the realm's best interests, or was his decision to back Aegon driven by personal ambition? Did he believe Aegon was the rightful ruler, or did he simply see an opportunity to advance his own position? These questions haunt Criston's legacy and leave room for interpretation, which is exactly what makes him such a compelling character. Criston's fall from grace, like his rise, was swift and brutal. As the war continued, the toll of the conflict began to wear him down. His strategies became increasingly desperate, and the once dominant Kingmaker found himself on the losing side of history. His final stand came during the Second Battle of Tumbleton, where, outnumbered and outmatched, Criston made one last fateful decision. Rather than surrender, he chose to die in battle, charging headlong into his enemies, sword in hand. It was a warrior's death, but it was also the end of an era. In the end, Criston's legacy is one of both loyalty and betrayal, honor and ambition. He was a man who rose from nothing to become one of the most powerful figures in Westeros, but he was also a man whose decisions led to some of the darkest days in Targaryen history. His role in the Dance of the Dragons can't be understated. Without him, the war might have taken a very different course. Criston's story serves as a reminder that power doesn't always come from birthright or titles. Sometimes it comes from the choices we make and the alliances we forge. In Criston's case, those choices made him the Kingmaker, a title that would follow him to the grave and beyond. He may not have been born into power, but by the end of his life, he had shaped the future of Westeros in ways few could have imagined. So as we continue to explore the lore of House of the Dragon, let Criston's story remind us of the fine line between heroism and villainy, loyalty and betrayal. In a world as complex as Westeros, even the most seemingly straightforward figures can surprise us, and Criston Cole is the perfect example of that. So, where does that leave us? With the siege of King's Landing, of course. This was the defining moment in the brutal conflict, a clash of ambitions, strategies, and betrayals. When you have two factions, the Greens and the Blacks, desperate to take control of the Iron Throne, the stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just about who would sit on the throne. It was about the future of the realm, and everything came down to the battle for the capital. King's Landing, the heart of Westeros, was the ultimate prize in this war. Both factions knew that whoever held the city would hold the kingdom. The Greens, led by Aegon II, already had the advantage of being within the walls, but they couldn't take that position for granted. The Blacks, on the other hand, were on the offensive, and they had no intention of letting their enemies rest easy in the capital. Now, to understand just how pivotal this siege was, we have to get into the strategies that both sides employed. The Greens, with Aegon II at their helm, relied heavily on their dragons and the already fortified city defenses. But even with these advantages, Aegon knew that his enemies weren't to be underestimated. He had to keep the city locked down, with every gate, every wall heavily guarded. And with tensions running high inside the city, he wasn't just worried about attacks from the outside. A divided city was a vulnerable city. On the other side, Rhaenyra and her supporters, the Black Council, were making their own moves. They weren't just planning an all-out assault. They were meticulously preparing for a strategic strike. Rhaenyra's forces understood that attacking the capital head-on would lead to devastating losses, so they played a longer game. Instead of rushing the gates, they began by isolating the city, cutting off supply routes, and trying to weaken Aegon's stronghold from within. It was a siege in the truest sense of the word, slow, methodical, and suffocating. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The dragons. Both sides had dragons, and both knew that these magnificent beasts could tip the scales. Daemon, Rhaenyra's most trusted ally and key figure in her campaign, was instrumental here. Mounted on his dragon Caraxes, Daemon struck fear into the hearts of those within the city. But it wasn't just about raw power. Daemon was cunning, using his dragon not just to destroy, but to intimidate and create chaos. Aegon II, too, had his dragon, Sunfire, a creature of immense strength and beauty. But as powerful as Sunfire was, Aegon's grip on the capital was tenuous. Every decision, every move he made was shadowed by the looming threat of Rhaenyra's forces closing in. The tension inside the walls was as much a battle of will as it was of weapons. As the siege dragged on, the wear on both sides began to show. The people of King's Landing, those caught in the middle, suffered the most. Starvation, disease, and fear gripped the city as the walls that were supposed to protect them also became their prison. Aegon II, despite his title and his dragon, was becoming increasingly isolated within his own capital. And then there's the human element, the personalities that made this siege what it was. Daemon, always the rogue and unpredictable force, was a key figure in the siege's intensity. His presence at the gates of the city was enough to send waves of panic through the defenders. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra was playing a different game, focused, strategic, and determined to claim what she believed was rightfully hers. And of course, we can't forget the other key players, the loyalists, the opportunists, and those who shifted allegiances as the war unfolded. Criston Cole, now fully entrenched on the side of the Greens, played a critical role in organizing the defense. His tactics and unflinching loyalty to Aegon made him both a hero to some and a villain to others. Yet, despite his efforts, the weight of the siege began to crumble even the staunchest defenders' resolve. The final stages of the siege brought the war to its breaking point. By the time the walls of King's Landing began to give way, it was clear that this wasn't just a battle for the throne. It was a battle for the soul of Westeros. When the Black Council's forces finally breached the city, what followed was nothing short of chaos. The streets ran red, alliances were shattered, and the city that had once been the seat of power became a symbol of the war's devastation. But perhaps the most lasting consequence of the siege was the political fallout. Aegon II, though technically the victor in many ways, emerged from the conflict a broken man. His hold on the throne was as fragile as ever, and the capital, once the jewel of his kingdom, was left in ruins. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra's forces had proven their strength, but the cost was high, with countless lives lost and the kingdom teetering on the brink of collapse. The siege of King's Landing didn't just determine the outcome of a war. It redefined the very landscape of Westerosi politics. The Iron Throne, once the symbol of ultimate power, now stood as a reminder of the bloodshed and loss that came with the ambition to rule. Both councils, the Greens and Blacks, paid dearly for their desire to claim it, and the scars of this conflict would last for generations. In the end, King's Landing was a prize that cost more than anyone could have imagined. The siege stands as one of the most significant and devastating moments in the history of House of the Dragon, forever altering the balance of power in Westeros. And even though the city remained standing, it was clear to all who witnessed the battle that something fundamental had changed, both in the city and the realm it was meant to rule. With the battle over, the true heroes began to rise from the ashes, and when looking through the carnage, there was one family that looked to make it out better than everyone else: the Hightowers. Behind every power move, every strategic decision, and every political maneuver, This family was always present, always pulling the strings. And if you ask anyone, the name Hightower wasn't just tied to one event, but a chain of actions that shaped the Civil War. House Hightower, based in the ancient seat of Oldtown, is one of the oldest and wealthiest families in Westeros. Their rise to power wasn't just a result of wealth or military might. It was their unrivaled ability to maneuver through the complex world of Westerosi politics that made them so influential. From their stronghold, the High Tower itself, which soared above Oldtown like a beacon of power, the family cemented their role as a political powerhouse long before the events of House of the Dragon unfolded. But it wasn't just the location or wealth that made House Hightower influential. It was the sharp minds that led them. The patriarch of the family, Otto, served as Hand of the King to Viserys I, a position that placed him at the heart of the realm's decision-making. Otto was more than just a trusted advisor. He was the architect of the Green's push for power. Otto's ambition to see his grandson Aegon II crowned as king fueled much of the tension that ultimately led to the Targaryen civil war. It's fascinating to think about how much influence Otto wielded. Through him, the Hightowers became the family behind the throne, even if they weren't wearing the crown themselves. Otto understood that power wasn't just about who sat on the throne, but who controlled the person sitting on it. And for Otto, that person was his daughter, Alicent, who had become queen by marrying Viserys. But Alicent wasn't a mere pawn in Otto's game. She had her own ambitions, and together they were a formidable force, working in unison to push Aegon's claim. The family's influence is undeniable, and when it comes to Alicent, she was every bit her father's daughter. As queen, she became the face of the Green's Council, aligning herself with powerful allies who supported Aegon's ascension. And while Alicent's motivations were partly maternal, wanting to secure a future for her children, she also had a deep understanding of the dangerous game she was playing. Every move was calculated. Every decision weighed carefully against its potential outcomes. She understood that placing Aegon on the Iron Throne would not only secure her family's future, but would cement her place in history as the mother of a king. Now, while we've seen plenty of House Hightower's influence on screen, the family's history stretches far deeper. They didn't just rise to prominence through their association with the Targaryens. Their roots in Oldtown and the Citadel made them key players in Westeros long before the Targaryens ever landed. Oldtown was a center of learning, trade, and religious influence, and House Hightower controlled it all. This gave them a unique leverage in the realm, not just politically, but culturally and economically. The fact that they could call upon this influence during the Civil War only added to their power. But of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing for the family. The Hightowers were heavily invested in the success of the Green's Council, and that meant their fortunes rose and fell with Aegon II's victories and losses. They were deeply involved in the conflict, and while the family's influence was far-reaching, they couldn't control every outcome. Still, their ability to navigate the dangerous waters of Westerosi politics allowed them to remain a force to be reckoned with, even as the war dragged on. One of the most interesting dynamics of the Civil War was how the Hightowers used their alliances to keep themselves relevant, no matter the outcome. They had their own army, their own wealth, and their own influence in Oldtown, which gave them an advantage that many other families lacked. But more than anything, they knew how to play the long game. Whether Aegon II succeeded or failed, the Hightowers had positioned themselves as indispensable to the ruling power, whoever that might be. And while the family is often associated with their ambition, we shouldn't overlook the complexities of their motivations. Alicent's loyalty to her children was unquestionable, and while Otto certainly had ambitions for his grandson, it's important to remember that he wasn't merely scheming for the sake of power. He truly believed that Aegon was the rightful king, and in his mind, securing that claim was not just for the Hightower legacy, but for the stability of the realm. It's easy to dismiss him as a cold political operator, but Otto's actions were driven by what he saw as duty. As the war dragged on, the influence of the Hightowers became even more pronounced. They weren't just puppeteers behind the scenes. They were active participants in shaping the conflict. Otto's political strategies, from orchestrating key alliances to ensuring that the Greens Council maintained their control over King's Landing, were pivotal in keeping Aegon's claim alive. And even when the war seemed to be tipping in Rhaenyra's favor, the Hightowers remained steadfast, constantly adapting their strategies to survive the shifting tides of power. In the aftermath of the Civil War, House Hightower's role in Westerosi politics remained significant. They may not have had the dragons or the throne, but their influence stretched far beyond the battlefield. Their legacy as the power behind the throne was cemented during the events of House of the Dragon. But their story was far from over. With Old Town and the Citadel still under their control, the Hightowers remained one of the most powerful and influential families in the realm, continuing to shape the future of Westeros long after the dust had settled on the Civil War. It's undeniable, while the dragons of House Targaryen may have taken center stage during the war, the Hightowers were always there, lurking in the background, pulling the strings. And in the end, it was their mastery of politics, not just their proximity to power, that ensured their place in the annals of history. And now, that brings us to the end of the dance. The moment when all the bloodshed, betrayal, and chaos that consumed Westeros reaches its final chapter with the death of Aegon II. After years of conflict, battles fought with dragons and swords alike, the end of his life also marked the end of the civil war that nearly shattered House Targaryen forever. But as with so many things in this tale, Aegon's death wasn't simply an ending. It was a mystery that left more questions than answers. Aegon's reign was marked by violence, and his fall was no different. After years of civil war, both he and Rhaenyra, his half-sister and rival for the Iron Throne, had seen the depths of human cruelty. But in the end, it wasn't a mighty battle that took Aegon's life. It was something far more shadowy, leaving Westeros to speculate for generations to come. One thing was clear, though. By the time Aegon II was dead, the Targaryens were in shambles. Dragons, the ultimate symbol of their power, were nearly extinct. The once mighty family who had ruled Westeros with fire and blood were now fractured, weakened by their own civil war. Aegon's death was the last strike in a conflict that had left their house teetering on the edge of oblivion. So how did it happen? Was it poison? Perhaps it was a plot devised by his enemies, those who had long harbored resentment for the Targaryen claim to power. Or could it have been his own allies, seeing an opportunity to end the war and secure their positions in the new order of Westeros? The truth remains elusive, with different sources pointing to different culprits. One theory is that Aegon's own council, men he trusted like Larys Strong, saw the writing on the wall. They knew that with Rhaenyra's death and Aegon's weak position, the best way to secure peace in Westeros was to eliminate him quietly and pave the way for a new ruler. After all, Aegon had become a king of ashes, ruling over a land devastated by war. It's not hard to imagine those close to him deciding that the realm's future lay in fresh leadership. Another possibility is that it was a plot by the remnants of Rhaenyra's supporters, those loyal to her son, Aegon III, who would eventually ascend to the throne. Aegon II's death cleared the path for the boy's rule and brought an official end to the civil war. In this version of events, the murder of Aegon was less about vengeance and more about finally closing the door on the bloody conflict that had ravaged the realm. But regardless of who orchestrated it, the impact of Aegon's death reverberated through Westeros. The war was over, but the scars it left behind ran deep. The Targaryens had torn themselves apart in a struggle for power, and while one side ultimately triumphed, it was a hollow victory. The dragons were gone, and with them, the Targaryens' greatest weapon. The Iron Throne, once a symbol of their absolute authority, had become a seat of blood and treachery. In the aftermath of Aegon's death, Westeros had to pick up the pieces. The realm was shattered, and the nobility, once caught in the crossfire of the dance, were now faced with the task of rebuilding. It was a moment that should have been one of triumph for House Targaryen, but instead it was marked by loss and uncertainty. For Aegon III, who would take the throne as a boy king, the end of the war meant the beginning of a reign defined by sorrow. He had lost both his parents to the civil war. His mother, Rhaenyra, had been devoured by Aegon II's dragon, and now his uncle was dead too. Aegon III's ascension wasn't a victory. It was a testament to the ruin left behind by the war. This young king, scarred by the horrors of the dance, ruled over a kingdom still reeling from the devastation. His reign would be marked by the absence of dragons, a grim reminder of the Civil War's cost. And though Aegon III was known as the Dragonbane for the extinction of the last dragons during his reign, it wasn't by choice. He, like the rest of Westeros, was simply a product of the aftermath of the dance. The Civil War left its mark on more than just the Targaryens. The other great houses of Westeros, from the Starks in the north to the Lannisters in the west, had also been drawn into the conflict. Alliances had been shattered, blood had been spilled, and now the realm was left to pick up the pieces. The Iron Throne might have been reclaimed by the Targaryens, but their grip on power was more tenuous than ever. In many ways, Aegon II's death was a mercy. It brought an end to the bloodshed and allowed for the beginnings of peace. But that peace came at a cost, and the Targaryens would never again be the same. The legacy of the dance lingered for generations, a dark chapter in their storied history that served as a warning for those who would follow. The long-term consequences for House Targaryen were profound. While they managed to hold on to the throne for some time, the war had sown seeds of doubt in the minds of the people of Westeros. The Targaryens, once seen as near-divine rulers, had revealed themselves to be just as susceptible to greed, ambition, and internal strife as any other house. Their dragons had once been their greatest asset, but by the end of the dance, they were nearly extinct, leaving the Targaryens without the one thing that had set them apart from the rest of the realm. So, with Aegon II's death, The Dance of the Dragons came to a close, but it was a bitter ending, one that left the realm scarred and the Targaryen dynasty forever changed. Peace returned to Westeros, but it came at a steep price. And though the Targaryens would go on to rule for many more years, the legacy of the dance would haunt them, a reminder of what happens when family turns against family and dragons turn against dragons. As we come to the end of this journey through the history, wars, and betrayals that shaped House of the Dragon, we're left with one resounding truth: nothing comes without a cost. The civil war that ripped the realm apart, the Dance of the Dragons, was more than just a power struggle between two sides of a family. It was the culmination of years of ambition, secrets, and deep-seated rivalries that finally boiled over. For every battle fought, there were lives shattered. For every dragon that soared above the skies of Westeros, there was fire and destruction left in its wake. And for every move made on the chessboard of politics, there were consequences that rippled through the generations. The aftermath of the dance left Westeros changed. The mighty Targaryens, once feared and respected for their dragons and their strength, were weakened, vulnerable. They held onto the Iron Throne, yes, but their hold on power was never the same. The Civil War had stripped them of their most valuable asset, the dragons, and with that, they lost the edge that had set them apart from the other houses of Westeros. From that point on, they were just another family fighting to stay on top. But the story doesn't end with just war and loss. There's something deeper here, a sense of inevitability, of cycles repeating. Power corrupts, and even the greatest families, with all their might and influence, aren't immune to the forces of fate. We saw it with Viserys I's desire for peace, shattered by those closest to him. We saw it with Rhaenyra's ambitions, dashed by betrayal. And we saw it with Aegon II, whose reign ended not in triumph, but in mystery and blood. It's a tale as old as time, really. Families rise, empires fall, and in the end, it's not always the strongest or the most cunning who survive. It's the ones who can adapt. The Targaryens learned that the hard way. The dragons, once their greatest weapon, became their downfall. The infighting that had simmered beneath the surface for so long finally exploded into open conflict, and the realm paid the price. And yet through it all, there's something undeniably human about this story. It's easy to see the Targaryens as larger-than-life figures, dragon lords, kings and queens with fire in their veins. But at the core of their tale is something we can all relate to: the struggle for identity, the desire to belong, the fears of losing everything we fought for. Whether it's the ambitions of a queen, the loyalty of a knight, or the grief of a mother who's lost a child, these are stories that resonate beyond the screen, beyond the pages of history. As we close this chapter on House of the Dragon, we're left with more than just facts and figures. We're left with the echoes of these characters, their hopes, their fears, their legacies. They may have lived in a time of dragons, magic, and power, but at their core, they were driven by the same emotions that drive us all. In the end, the Dance of the Dragons wasn't just a war, it was a lesson in what happens when power becomes the end game, when family fractures, and when the pursuit of the throne becomes more important than the kingdom itself. The Targaryens survived, but only just. And as we've seen time and time again in Westeros, survival is never guaranteed. So, as we leave behind the burning castles, the fallen dragons, and the bloody battles, we carry with us the weight of these stories, the triumphs, the tragedies, and the closure they bring. Because in Westeros, as in life, the story is never really over. It simply moves on to the next chapter, and who knows what lies ahead for the Seven Kingdoms. Only time and the tides of power will tell.